Chapter 947. What's more, the boarding of the international flights had already begun. The police officers were still checking in at the security checkpoint. After all, there would be facial scans at the security checkpoint. If he was a criminal, he would definitely be identified. It would be fine if he was facing a normal criminal. After all, his ID and face wouldn't change. But they didn't know that the person they were facing was an international criminal. The tall and slender man had at least 5 IDs and corresponding IDs. He knew how to disguise himself. Moreover, the police officers wouldn't expect him to be hiding in the tour group. Therefore, even if there were people going back and forth looking for him, no one would really notice him. Why are there so many special police officers all of a sudden? Is there something wrong? There shouldn't be so many special police officers usually, right? I'm not sure, but he's so handsome. The appearance of the large number of special police officers caused the people in the airport to start discussing. Gradually, the people also realized that the security today seemed to be especially strict. There were also special police officers patrolling near the boarding gates. At the same time, there were 3 planes flying abroad. And the distance between each boarding gate was very far. It was also a problem to decide which one to control. Moreover, international flights were different from domestic flights. Sometimes, even the control had to do diplomatic work in advance. Before getting the documents, no one had any right to stop anyone from entering the plane. At most, they could find an excuse to delay the flight, but they couldn't cancel the flight. Obviously, the police officers were still worried. In the end, 2 people went to each boarding gate. They still didn't see the target. The tall and slender man held the registration card and followed behind the 2 old men. They talked and laughed as they walked into the boarding gate. The special police officer reached out and stopped him. He glanced at his ID and face, then looked at the old man behind him. At that moment, the tall and slender man's palms were sweating. But he believed that God still cared for him. The special police officer didn't stare at him for long. He quickly gave him a hand gesture. The tall and slender man smiled and said, "Thank you." With a smile on his face, he walked into the boarding gate. Then, he went through the built passage and walked directly in the direction of the plane. The beautiful space station was in front of the cabin, welcoming all the passengers with great etiquette. Once he got on the plane, it would be harder for those people to find him. The tall and slender man found a seat by the window and sat down. He raised his hand to look at the watch on his wrist and calculated the time. In the airport, Director Huang's expression wasn't good. "No suspicious person." "Yes, Chief, we have searched everywhere." During the security check, we found some people who brought some things onto the plane. They were all detained by us, but the people who were detained are not suspects. Director Huang's breathing deepened. "Are you sure there isn't anyone suspicious?" "He is definitely at the airport." Qin Mo's reasoning had never been wrong. How could it not be possible? "Director Huang, we've really sent people to every security checkpoint. The information from the airport is the same, this person hasn't appeared." Director Huang's face turned stern. "Continue the search. There's no need to look for the security checkpoint." An indifferent voice rang out. Director Huang turned around, spotting Qin Mo standing in the middle with one hand stuffed into his trouser pocket, his eyes fixed on the clock. His side profile was still handsome and elegant, attracting everyone's attention immediately. Moreover, there was a youngster with a unique hair color standing beside him. However, Bojio's reaction was faster. When she saw someone looking in her direction, she took off her black hooded top and pulled the hood up, revealing only her clean curves. Even her eyelashes, which were as fine as a crow's feather, couldn't be seen. It had to be said that the hood had a certain concealment effect, mainly because it suppressed the color of her hair. Qin Mo was still wearing his well-ironed police uniform, which didn't stand out in such a setting since the people around were all police officers. Besides, no one would think of Supreme Alliance's captain as a police officer. Hence, when they saw him, their attention was slightly diverted. Bojo took a step towards Qin Mo, trying her best to reduce her presence. Her silver hair was handsome, but it was easy to expose her identity. Qin Mo seemed to understand the youngster's intentions. He reached out and pressed on the man's head, pulling him towards him before turning to Director Huang. At this time, the plane should be boarding. Based on the time he left, there are only 3 available flights. He should have passed the security checkpoint by now. That isn't possible. If he had passed the security checkpoint, we would definitely be able to tell. Be it the airport staff or our colleagues, they didn't find anyone similar to him. The 2 Interpol officers were anxious. With his words, they wanted to take action because deep down, they agreed with Qin Mo's point of view. According to the standards of an international criminal, there was a possibility of a certain level of disguise. Someone who was able to create a case like the maiden's sacrifice definitely wasn't simple. It was highly possible that the criminal had boarded one of the planes. If they followed the route provided by the profiler, their guess was the highest possibility. They had to board the plane immediately and arrest the suspect. Otherwise, once they alighted from the plane and entered America, many things would be out of their control. Hence, no matter what, they had to start the arrest, even if they had to use their identity as Interpol officers. Of course, Qin Mo knew what they were thinking. His tone was calm. This is China and the people on the plane are all Chinese. If the criminal has boarded the plane, all the passengers on the plane might become hostages. According to international practice, you have the right to ask for our cooperation, but we, China, still have the initiative. Hearing this, the 2 Interpol officers were taken aback. They hadn't expected that before they could open their mouths, their words would be stuffed back into their throats. The reason that was at the tip of their tongues was forcefully swallowed back into their throats. Qin Mo was indeed referring to international rules. How did he know about international rules? Director Huang listened by the side. You mean the criminal is already on the plane? Based on his understanding of the aloof youngster, he wouldn't have said that if it wasn't the case. Qin Mo glanced at the time, his voice still calm. There is a 90% chance he is on the plane. Go ask which plane is preparing to depart. With that, Qin Mo turned his head and looked at the youngster beside him. The youngster's hands were stuffed into her long jacket, the hooded top covering most of her face. It wasn't clear what she was looking at. She was staring at a spot like a curious little kid. In that instant, Qin Mo seemed to have recalled something. It was a blurry feeling. The miniature version of a certain someone seemed to have been like this before, staring at a spot with her eyes wide open, her little face smeared with paint. It was very, very familiar. Here it comes again. Qin Mo furrowed his brows as though he was coming back to reality. He paused for a moment before walking towards the youngster. What are you looking at? Bojo lifted her chin, gesturing for Qin Mo to look at the group of people going through the security check. The distinguishing feature of the group was that everyone was wearing the same t-shirt. Some of them were wearing a hat, while others were not. I think we can start with these people. If they want to avoid being tracked and board the plane safely, they either have to disguise themselves as staff or a member of the group. I'm more inclined to the latter. If it's the former, it's impossible for that person to disguise himself as a stewardess. Someone as handsome as Brother Mo and I would be more likely. She didn't forget to praise herself for her analysis. Only a certain someone would do such a thing. But Qin Mo lifted his lips, his left hand pressing down on the youngster's head. I agree with you. With that, he turned towards the Special Forces officer beside him. According to your records, which of the 3 planes has a tour group? Reporting, young Master Qin, there are 2, both of them are from American Airlines. Which of the two planes takes off first? Director Huang, go and negotiate with them, try to get half an hour to an hour's time. Qin Mo said this because he knew the other party had agreed to the same amount as well. Director Huang wasn't confident. This isn't a domestic airline, it's an international route and isn't a local airline. Even the airline is from America, I'm afraid they wouldn't be willing to give up so much time. Qin Mo asked for the name of the Special Forces airline before he dialed a number from his contact list. It was an international call. Very quickly, a deep voice came from the other end. It was spoken in authentic English. Qin, what is it? Is there a business collaboration? If it's a project from your family, we won't reject anyone, no matter how much. William, I'm not looking for you to discuss a project. One of your company's planes has met with some problems in our country. I would like you to help me get an hour to delay the departure by half an hour to an hour. William smiled. What's so important? Are you going to chase after an escaped girl? That's how it is on the television. An hour is too long, I can get them to delay by half an hour. All right. I'll make the arrangements now, treat it as me returning the favor. Qin Mo hung up, turning towards the Special Forces and Director Huang. The plane will be delayed by half an hour, we need someone who is good at identifying disguises. I can't go up, the other party might recognize me and be wary of me. Is there anyone who is good at that? The Special Forces were indeed good at identifying disguises, but they weren't that good. Bojo glanced over, no one raised their hands. Brother Mo, what do you think of me? The youngster smiled devilishly, her words sharp. Everyone on the plane has become his hostage. If he knows how to fly, once he notices something amiss in the cabin, he would take action. Hence, it wouldn't be suitable for him to wear a police uniform. I'm the only one he doesn't know. Even if he sees me, he would only treat me as a passenger and wouldn't have any resistance. Time trickled by. At this moment, in the cabin, the tall and slender man seated by the window was starting to get impatient, getting more and more impatient at times like this. Everything was over, but the plane still hadn't taken off. The tall and slender man reached for the light, calling the air stewardess over. The air stewardess's smile was perfect. Sir, do you need a blanket? Or is there anything else you need? No, it's just 10 minutes before the plane takes off. The tall and slender man couldn't sit still, asking the air stewardess to check her watch. Why isn't the cabin door closed yet? The stewardess lowered her body again. I'm sorry, sir. Our plane has encountered some procedural irregularities. In addition, there are still passengers who haven't come in yet. We're in the midst of final adjustments. Please forgive us for the inconvenience. Procedural inconveniences. The tall and slender man repeated, arching a brow. He decided to wait for another 10 minutes. If the plane wasn't closing up after 10 minutes, it would be time for him to consider his next move. Based on the current situation, the old couple beside him were the best hostages. Their ability to resist was one thing, and the other was that they didn't have any powerful weapons on them. If he had a weapon, he wouldn't be able to get away with it. Therefore, holding one of the old couple hostage wouldn't just be within his control, it would also allow him to kill 10 police officers. However, he still had to wait and see. After all, if he held a hostage here, it would mean that his situation wouldn't be as perfect as it seemed. He still had to cooperate with the Chinese police. He was probably overthinking. The other party couldn't possibly know that he had already boarded the plane. They must still be checking him at the security checkpoint and boarding gate, the tall and slender man thought and looked towards the cabin door. Indeed, there were still people who hadn't boarded. What the air stewardess had said was probably true. The delay was probably due to the system adjustment. There was no problem in the cabin. He could wait a little longer. If the special forces were to enter, he wouldn't wait for them to recognize him. Once he saw them, he would take action immediately. The 10 minutes passed extremely slowly for the tall and slender man. When the 8 minutes were up, he looked at his watch again. It wasn't just him, the others were also asking the air stewardess for the reason. However, the air stewardess gave the same explanation. No one noticed that at this moment, a youngster appeared at the cabin door. The youngster lowered his eyes and only his chin could be seen. His face was covered, but from this angle, he gave off an unruly vibe. The hood covered the youngster's hair color, making him look mysterious. When the air stewardess said welcome aboard, she was slightly stunned, thinking that the youngster was a celebrity. Chapter 948. As the last passenger to board the plane, Bojo didn't keep a low profile. Instead, it suited her image as a hedonistic young master. When she had been alone, she had been rather unrestrained. But she wasn't sure if it was because of her childhood memories, but the moment she was in front of the Almighty, she wanted to show her best side. In order to conquer her little sweetheart, she had to be mindful of her image. International flights were usually large passenger planes. As she walked from the beginning to the end, Bojo's gaze locked onto the group of tourists wearing the same top. She only had 5 minutes left. After 5 minutes, the cabin door would close and the plane would take off. She had to confirm who the culprit was within 5 minutes, and she couldn't make a mistake. If she did, there would be more trouble. Disguise was one of Bojo's specialties. She held a small leather suitcase in one hand and a boarding pass in the other. In fact, it was just a piece of blank paper that was cut out at the last minute. But it was this piece of paper that she looked at as if she was looking for her seat. Because of this, her gaze could naturally fall on every seat, and she wouldn't be suspected. The youngster walked from the front of the plane to the back of the airport casually. But in reality, she was continuously collecting and analyzing information. Her brain worked quickly. It was obvious that the age group of the tourists was on the older side. And the person they were looking for was between 23 to 27 years old. Of course, she didn't rule out the possibility of him disguising himself as an old or middle-aged man. Age could be changed through appearance, but the information revealed by the skin on the fingers and neck wouldn't change. And that person's figure, when people reached old age, they would naturally shorten their bodies. If they were tall, they would have a tendency to stoop. The elderly in this group didn't meet the standard height. That left the middle-aged man. Bojo narrowed her eyes. Under normal circumstances, if it were her, she would also dress up as a middle-aged man. She could disguise herself as an old man for a short period of time, but the flight would take a long time. It would be easy to be noticed. It wasn't easy to alight from the plane, and they had to enter the country from America. Hence, the target was shortened to 5, regardless of gender. But the culprit was a man. She couldn't rule out the possibility of him being a woman. First, she had to see if the middle-aged woman was really a woman. Many people looked at the Adam's apple when judging a man or woman. Because sometimes, some men's Adam's apple wasn't obvious. The woman also had a bulge on her neck, but it wasn't an Adam's apple. To differentiate between men and women, one had to look at their bone structure and figure. As someone who often disguised as a man, Bojo was very experienced. Hence, she never wore short sleeves. This was the only way she could fool the Almighty. Fortunately, the two at the airport were both wearing skirts. From the joints of the arms and some of the forms, the waist and legs collapsed. Women of this age had all given birth before, so one could definitely tell the difference in their pelvis. When Bojo glanced over, she thought that everything was normal. There were only 3 of them left. What made her uncertain were the 2 middle-aged men sitting beside the 2 old men. Whether it was the state of the skin or the body shape, it was impossible to tell who the problem was. This was beyond her ability to discern. Chapter 949. The stewardess's voice rang out once more, signaling for the passengers to return to their seats. She had to find the culprit before the cabin door closed. Bojo had to drag the culprit down before the plane took off. Otherwise, what would happen to the National League? Once the plane took off, it would take more than a day for them to return. Was it the one on the left or the one on the right? Bojo pondered as she walked forward. She paused for a second. In that second, there was only one thought in her mind. If it was the Almighty, how would he differentiate? Actions were controlled by the person. Words and appearances could be deceiving. But his actions and micro-expressions were subconscious. This was when she had been very young. Her little canine pet had told her about it. At that time, she had been obsessed with dismantling keyboards and climbing walls. He had been the only one who had been leaning against the headboard like a little prince, dressed in pure white pajamas, reading a book that she couldn't understand. It had been like a bedtime story, reading to her. From time to time, he would pull himself away from the book, glancing at her sleepy eyes. Stupid. He wouldn't forget to pat her when he said those words. When she had been young, he had taught her half of the things she knew. Sometimes, humans were mysterious. The influence between them seemed to have been predestined from the start. Hence, when Bojo walked forward again, her dark gaze landed on their expressions and actions. Both of them were anxious. After all, everyone wanted to know when the plane would take off. However, after one of them raised his hand to look at the time, he began to play with his phone again, as if he was chatting. The other one turned towards Bojo, his gaze making it seem as though he had to be wary of anyone who entered. Bojo didn't avoid his gaze. Instead, she walked towards him with her boarding pass, just like an ordinary person looking for her seat. She walked forward with her small luggage, glancing at the seat number from time to time. Seeing this, the tall and slender man shifted his gaze back to his watch. After all, in his eyes, a high school student posed no threat at all. Moreover, the last person who came up was carrying a suitcase. If they were really here to capture him, they wouldn't take anything with them. The tall and slender man thought of the usual Interpol methods. But he wasn't aware of it. The young man in front of him was most familiar with how criminals thought. If she was the one escaping, she would also pay attention to the last person to enter the plane, and she would also observe who didn't take their luggage. Therefore, before entering the plane, the first thing she did was to grab a small suitcase. There was nothing in the suitcase, but she dragged it along to complete a layer of disguise. Bojo placed the suitcase down. She seemed to have found her position, but she wasn't sure. She glanced back and forth. At this moment, the tall and slender man was even less concerned. Listening to the countdown of the last minute, he flipped open the newspaper and was about to enjoy the moment of takeoff. The young man bent down, his silver hair faintly peeking out where his eyes were. The side of his face was as fair as jade, clean and handsome. "Sir, you seem to be sitting in the wrong seat. F12D, is this the right seat?" Bojo handed the boarding pass over. The tall and slender put down the newspaper and said in a normal voice, "This is my seat. Your seat is behind me." "Really?" The youngster laughed, a sinister aura in her voice. "I don't think your seat should be here, it should be in prison." With that, the tall and slender man's expression changed. He held on to the old man beside him, wanting to use him as a hostage. But in that instant, there was a loud crack. His wrists, which were holding on to the newspaper, were locked together. The young man's movements were extremely fast. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, he directly pressed his entire head onto the small table. There was a loud bang. The tall and slender man was still in a state of shock. That was when he realized that the youngster wasn't holding a boarding pass, it was a piece of white paper. The old man beside him was the first to react, exclaiming in shock. The air stewardesses were even more eager to rush over to them. But before they could move, a tall and slender figure appeared in front of the cabin door. A tall and slender figure appeared in front of the cabin door. It was Chin Mo. He had been in the tunnel all along, waiting for this sound. No matter who went in, he could remain calm and unhurried. But when it was that guy, Chin Mo had to admit that he had been slightly worried. He had been worried that there might be something he hadn't predicted. He had been worried that the criminal might have a weapon. But from the looks of it, the operation was going smoothly. With such a person appearing in front of the cabin, the air stewardesses would definitely cover their mouths instinctively. Police case. Chin Mo had already taken Director Huang's identification. He raised his right hand, releasing his aura. Everyone, please remain seated. Can I trouble the people in the middle to move aside so my men can bring him out? With such a sudden turn of events, everyone's first reaction would be to stand up and watch. But after Chin Mo finished speaking, 6 to 7 special police officers appeared behind him. No one dared to move. The old couple who were closest to Bo Jiao were in a state of shock. Bo Jiao seemed to have noticed them. After knocking them out, she lifted them up forcefully. She didn't stay any longer. The tall and slender man was held down by 2 special police officers as he walked towards the cabin entrance. When he caught sight of Chin Mo, his dazed mind snapped back to reality. He turned around abruptly and looked at the young man from before. Silver hair, black eyes, and an eye-catching face. He was supposed to be their next target, the young master of the Fu family, who was closest to Chin Mo. But their information hadn't mentioned him. Not only did he know how to disguise himself, he was also skilled. Inexplicably, a chill ran down the tall and slender man's spine. How much exactly did they know about the youngster who was always by Chin Mo's side? According to the information, the youngster didn't just know how to play games, he seemed to have some knowledge of computers as well. It had been countless times that their plans had been forced to stop because of a single person's cyber attack. The other party had even changed their bomb sequence without them knowing. They hadn't even been able to find out the other party's identity. But now, the tall and slender man had a terrifying thought. If the person who had been disrupting their plans was this youngster, then the consequences. The tall and slender man didn't dare to continue the thought. His face was already covered by a black cloth. The moment the cabin door closed, Chin Mo reached out and pulled Bo Jiao into his embrace. Chin Mo reached out and pulled Bo Jiao into his arms, acting as though there was no one else around. The Interpol officers glanced at each other, seeing the shock in each other's eyes. They hadn't expected them to have such a relationship other than being battle partners. The 2 Interpol officers were desperate for information. Once they caught the tall and slender man, they would join the interrogation. Chin Mo didn't follow them because he knew they wouldn't speak so easily. Before leaving the airport, Chin Mo instructed Director Huang, check the accounts under his various identities. Who are their financial transactions with? Who are the most frequent financial transactions? Director Huang was smart. You're saying that the one he has the most frequent contact with is his superior? No. Chin Mo glanced at Director Huang, his voice calm. Under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be any financial dealings within an organization. The ones that do are their partners, for example, the traitor in the crime squad. The moment the word traitor was mentioned, Director Huang's expression turned solemn. I understand. Bo Jiao sat at the front passenger seat, watching as Director Huang's figure grew smaller. She turned over. Little Huang really knows. If there really are financial dealings, it must be a huge sum. He would be able to know every single operation, and every single one of them is a crucial one. Otherwise, the news wouldn't have been leaked so quickly. This person could even make use of the new criminal psychologist to take away your authority. His position shouldn't be low. Indeed, it isn't low. At the very least, it would be someone of the same rank or above. Chi Nemo made use of the red light to light a cigarette. He held it with one hand, his features sharp. He knows that it's just a few people. He knows about the politics of the government. Leaking information isn't something a single person can do. If the investigation starts, all the related personnel will be held accountable. Chi Nemo took advantage of the time to wait for the traffic light to turn red. Behind every major case, there would be corruption. That was the reality in every country. As a hacker, Bojo knew it better than anyone else. But I didn't know high schoolers these days would know so much. The Almighty's casual comment made Bojo's heart flutter. She broke into a smile. There are so many movies and dramas, it's easy to understand. Corruption starts from the beginning, that's why there's an oversight. You know me, I love police dramas. Is that so? Chi Nemo glanced at the youngster. I remember your bookshelf only has novels like Overbearing CEO Falls in Love with Me, there aren't any police dramas. Of course, she wouldn't read police dramas since the robbers would always be caught. Bojo didn't want to be caught. Just as she was thinking about how to reply without being discovered, a voice suddenly rang beside her ear. It seems like the things placed in the Fu family's house aren't what you like, it's what you liked in the past. Chi Mo's voice was calm. Sometimes, I really wonder if you're that young Master Fu. In that instant, the air in the car seemed to have frozen. The two men's eyes met. One was extremely deep. The other was so dark that it was translucent. Neither of them shifted their gazes away. Bojo's heart seemed to be nailed to the ground, beating slowly. Until the phone rang, Bojo broke into a faint smile. If I'm not me, who else can I be? Let's pick up the call. With that, Bojo tilted her head, placing the phone beside her ear. Regardless of who was calling, Bojo was grateful. The moment the call went through, a voice came through. Little Spade, where are you? I'm at your door, hurry over. Chapter 950. He didn't wait for her to speak before hanging up. Bojo reached for her phone. Chi Nemo arched a brow. Lin Fong. Chi Nemo chuckled, but there wasn't much warmth in his eyes. Do you really intend to sleep there? From your tone, it sounds like it. Bojo watched the Almighty's sculpted face, feeling an inexplicable sense of misfortune. Speaking of misfortune, Lin Fong really fit the description. Originally, he had left the house valiantly and slammed the door loudly, intending to stay in a hotel for 2 days. It's not like he doesn't have money, right? Who knew that he wouldn't have brought his wallet when he left the house? If he had money, he could take a taxi since he could pay with his phone. But he needed an identification card to stay in a hotel. He couldn't leave in the day and return at night. How could that be considered running away from home? It would be like a child playing house. But for him to return to get his identification card, it would be too embarrassing. Yunhu must be mocking him now. How could he be so hesitant to leave home? All the more reason why he couldn't return. He would definitely find fault with him. Even if he didn't find fault with him, he would definitely take a look at him. Not to mention the things written in the text. It was too frightening. He actually wanted to use those techniques on him. F***ck, did he really think he was a pushover? That was why he had to wander outside. Thinking of this, Lin Fong kicked the wall heavily. The kick was so painful that his entire body arched. F***ck. This was the scene that Chi Nemo and Bojo saw when they drove back. Honestly, only a naive person would kick a wall when they couldn't get over it. Lin Feng's existence was the perfect definition of that word. Bojo rolled down the car window. She leaned against the window and whistled. After hearing the whistle, Lin Feng's first reaction was to look behind him. He saw the silver-haired youngster sitting in the car, looking at him with a leisurely smile on his lips. This posture is really handsome. That's right. Lin Feng was about to say more when he realized that the car in front of him was familiar. When he took a closer look, he saw a noble and aloof face. All of a sudden, Lin Feng swallowed the words he wanted to say. F***ck, why didn't Little Spade tell him that Captain was here too? Lin Feng knew how to restrain himself in front of Qin Mo. For example, he didn't place his arm around Little Spade's body like he usually did. Instead, when they reached the living room, he started to complain. Anyway, I don't plan to go back. Arrange a room for me. Bojo glanced at Lin Feng, thinking that he wouldn't be able to win against Almighty Yun at his level. He hadn't considered the possibility of him finding his way over. You don't know how miserable I've been lately. Lin Feng hugged the cushion on the sofa. He glanced up at the ceiling before turning to Bojo. I'm a grown man and I still have to guard against my brother taking advantage of me. In the past, we could still talk about the weather and girls. When the room gets hot, we could remove our shirts whenever we wanted. We could play games or watch porn together. Now, I have to wrap myself up tightly at home. Let's not talk about putting our arms around each other's shoulders. If we were to get any closer, I would lose my integrity. Mother***, of all the things that guy could be thinking about, he just had to think about my chrysanthemum. Bojo didn't say a word. She just smiled. Little submissive Lin looked rather pitiful. Hey, Little Spade, do you have beer? Lin Feng didn't feel like he was suffering at all. He was the one attacking, wasn't he? Bojo didn't want to laugh too much. She held her chin and arched a brow lazily. Yes, why? Give me a can first, I'm suffocating. Lin Feng placed the cushion at the side, his eyes bright. Qin Mo walked over and tossed a can of beer to Lin Feng. His tone was calm. Why? He doesn't even allow you to drink. That's not it. Without a second thought, Lin Feng pulled open the can of beer, tilted his head back, and drank a mouthful. I'm afraid I'll drink too much and give Yunhu another chance. He's not easy to deal with, so I have to stay sober. Qin Mo glanced at him, replying slowly, I see. Think about it, aren't I pitiful? I love drinking and eating meat skewers, but I'm not allowed to drink Budweiser. It's killing me, Lin Feng said, taking another sip. Qin Mo sat there, tossing another can of beer to him. Indeed, do you need someone to prepare some food to go with the alcohol? Lin Feng had never seen his captain so caring. Was it because of Little Spade? TSK. That was why people in love. It was unbelievable. But such a huge change in his captain was rather frightening. Lin Feng caressed his arm. It wasn't much, he just wanted to eat and drink to his heart's content. Everything else wasn't important to him. Chen Xiaodong stood at the side, confused. That wasn't it. What exactly did he hear? Almighty Yun had been thinking about Almighty Lin and he was so blatant about it. In the past, he had always thought that the rumors on the internet were lies. After all, he knew that when people interacted with their brothers, they would naturally put their arms around each other's shoulders. He didn't understand what the girls were screaming about. Weren't Almighty Yun and Almighty Lin normal? Why did they suddenly become abnormal? No, that wasn't right. Why were there suddenly gay men around him? Young master was gay, Almighty Qin had been turned gay by his young master and now, Almighty Lin and Almighty Yun were at such a stage, it could be said that as a straight man, he was under a lot of pressure when there were gays around him. It was better to call Madam and ask her to continue shopping with movie queenin. It was too dangerous at home. Chen Xiaodong was afraid that He Honghua wouldn't be able to take it. It was fine that young master was gay, but there were so many of his kind around him. After placing the dishes on the table, Chen Xiaodong went to do his own things. Before he left, he glanced at the empty beer cans at the side. There were quite a lot of them. Bo Jiu was looking at the food as well. As she ate, she arched a brow. As expected, someone was going to be in trouble. Lin Feng was a naive boy. He didn't even realize that the Almighty was trying to force him to drink. This person. Bo Jiu didn't know what to say. At this moment, Lin Feng bolted upright. His body was shaking and his words weren't clear. No, I have to make a phone call and show off to that guy. Bo Jiu shook his glass. It was empty. She glanced at the bottle of Maotai the Almighty had pushed over. Needless to say, Lin Feng definitely drank too much. What are you showing off for? Bo Jiu thought to herself. Lin Feng tossed his phone onto the table before picking it up. He dialed a string of numbers. Showing off that I successfully ran away from home. Bo Jiu. What's there to show off? At this moment, Lin Feng's phone was connected. It was on speaker mode. The voice on the other end was familiar and steady, but there was a tinge of anxiousness. Where are you? Burp, why should I tell you? Lin Feng burped, looking rather arrogant. To Bo Jiu, he was asking for trouble. Yunhu's fingers stilled. You drank. I didn't just drink, I ate meat too. That's right. I even saw. Lin Feng wanted to say that he saw a girl, but after scanning the surroundings, there wasn't a single girl. He changed his words. I even saw a hunk. Yunhu narrowed his eyes, his tone turning cold. Which hunk? A hunk with silver hair. Lin Feng was drunk, acting rather stupid. Don't bother about that. I'm just telling you, I won't be going back today. You can play with yourself. Yunhu arched a brow. A hunk with silver hair. Why? Lin Feng lifted his chin proudly. Can't I have silver hair? I'm more handsome than you anyway. Yunhu's voice was unhurried, as though he had changed into another person. There was even a hint of a smile in his voice. Why not? Have fun. Then, Yunhu ended the call. Lin Feng, who was hung up on, was a little confused. She turned towards Bo Jiu. What does he mean by that? Does he not believe that I'm with a hunk? Bo Jiu held her forehead. He didn't want to talk nonsense with you anymore and was coming to fetch you. Who else do you know besides me, the silver-haired hunk? Bo Jiu wouldn't say that out loud. Lin Feng, the naive fool, had no chance of being saved. At this stage, Qin Mo shook the wine glass in his hand. Even Qin Mo shook the wine glass in his hand, his voice indifferent. It seems like I saved a phone call. That was right. The Almighty had wanted to get Lin Feng drunk because he had a plan. But who would have expected Lin Feng to be so careless? What was this? Did he pack himself up and send it to someone else's mouth to eat? Student Lin Feng, who was drunk, didn't realize this problem and insisted on having a heart-to-heart talk with Bo Jiu. Tell me, isn't he too much? I still don't have a proper girlfriend and every girl that tries to get close to me is because of him. I don't trust women anymore, f***ck. You want a girlfriend? Bo Jiu had always believed that relationships shouldn't be forced. If Lin Feng really wanted a girlfriend, she had to make him stay. Lin Feng shook his head. That isn't the main point. If that isn't the main point, then what is? Bo Jiu arched a brow. Lin Feng took another sip of beer, his expression serious. Do I look like a bottom? Aren't those texts supposed to put me on the top? So you're conflicted about the top? Bojo's lips twitched. Lin Feng waved his hands. That's not it, I can't explain it clearly. I just don't like being controlled. I don't care when he goes out to eat with other girls. Bojo. Was this the time to complain? Senior Lin, you're getting more and more gay. Where's the beer? Lin Feng's beautiful eyes narrowed. Give me another bottle, I have to get drunk with Little Spade today. Little Spade, you can tell me what you are unhappy with, Captain. Don't worry, I will never tell Captain, it will be a secret between us forever. Lin Feng's beautiful eyes narrowed. Fine. He was so drunk that he didn't even know the Almighty was there. Bojo was really worried about a certain someone tonight. To be honest, I really didn't think that Captain would actually be pursued by you. I always thought that the girl he kissed at the ball was his true love. Lin Feng shook his head. Captain is too fickle. When Qin Mo heard this, he raised his eyebrows slowly and smiled. There was an obvious coldness at the corners of his lips. If you get caught by Yunhu tonight, will you die a horrible death? How is that possible? Lin Feng stuttered. That guy must have never expected me to be here, he must be thinking I'm having a date at some hotel. Is that so? Qin Mo lifted the corners of his lips. Bojo watched as the Almighty sent a message to Almighty Yun. Bring him back. The reply came swiftly. I'm on my way, I'll be there soon. Indeed, from Lin Feng's words, Almighty Yun already knew where he was. But Lin Feng didn't feel any sense of danger, he continued to burp. Little Spade, who do you think that girl is? Oh right. Tell me honestly, what kind of clothes were you wearing that day? Why didn't we find you? Guess. Bojo leaned back lazily. Lin Feng shook his head. It must have been ugly, I know how it feels. Dressing up as a girl is going to kill straight guys like us. Burp, that's not right, you aren't straight, you are gay. Wait a minute, stop swaying, let me see for myself. Why does it look so familiar? I remember now, that girl had the same eyes that day. Bojo frowned, wondering if she had been recognized. She didn't want to be recognized. Her head hurt. Even Qin Mo turned to look at Lin Feng when he heard this. It was obvious that Lin Feng was still deep in thought, but only he knew what he was thinking. Bojo was about to speak. Lin Feng slapped his forehead. Little Spade, don't tell me you have a younger sister that you haven't introduced to us. Bojo. What a naive mind, always so curious. Your younger sister is really pretty. Lin Feng was lost in his own imagination. Did Captain agree because you look similar to your younger sister? Sigh. It's another story about a substitute. Little Spade, you're really pitiful. Bojo was speechless. Why would a straight guy like you want to read a substitute story? Who said a straight guy can't read a substitute story? Lin Feng shouted again. I like it. When Qin Mo heard this, he lost his patience. He sent a few more words. Where are you? Very quickly, 2 words appeared on the screen. Entrance. After Qin Mo finished reading, he stood up without a change in expression. Lin Feng hooked his arm around Bojo's shoulders, speaking the truth between brothers. Brother, let me tell you, there aren't any good men. If Captain treats you as a substitute, you have to kick him out. I will fight with you and kick Huzi out. I think you should turn to take a look before you say that. Bojo held her chin, reminding him calmly. Chapter 951. The moment Lin Feng said that. In an instant. The air around the newcomer became colder. Yunhu didn't look happy either. Bojo felt that this person was hopeless, he couldn't even recognize a wolf. It would be strange if he wasn't taken away. Yunhu glanced over at him. Lin Feng was still chuckling. Come, handsome, sit down and have a drink. This skill of being familiar with others was really inviting a wolf into the house. Bojo watched as Lin Feng drank another can of beer. Yunhu was sitting beside him. He touched his lips subconsciously, but he didn't even press his lips. Lin Feng was straightforward, slapping his tongue. Handsome, have we met before? With that, Lin Feng frowned again, leaning towards Bojo seriously. He lowered his voice. Little Spade, don't you think this guy looks like someone? Bojo replied lazily. A little. She sat back and watched as Lin Feng courted his own death. Burp. Wait a minute, let me think. Lin Feng shook his head, his expression solemn. It wasn't easy for him to make eye contact. His gaze wasn't as blurry as before, but when he met that chiseled and handsome face, he froze. He pulled Bojo over, turning his head. F***ck. Why is he here? When did he come? How did he find us? This isn't logical. Bojo took out her phone, smiling faintly as she pressed the record button, gesturing for him to listen carefully. Lin Feng was still in a daze, swaying back and forth before he heard the voice. Where are you? Why should I tell you? You drank. I didn't just drink, I ate meat too. That's right. I saw a hunk. Which hunk? A silver-haired hunk, you don't have to care about this. I'm telling you, I'm not going back today, you can play with yourself. A silver-haired hunk. Why? Can't he have silver hair? He's more handsome than you anyway. There's nothing wrong with that, have fun, do. After listening to this recording, Lin Feng's IQ was finally restored to its previous level. Now that he knew the truth, he was on the verge of tears. He wished he could find a hole to crawl into and bury himself alive. He was the one who said that Yunhu would find his way here. From the moment he entered, Yunhu hadn't said a word. Instead, he swept a glance at the empty wine cans on the ground. There were about a dozen of them. It seemed like he hadn't been drinking recently and had been craving for so much. This made it easier for him to take her away. Who gave you the wine? Yunhu asked. Lin Feng felt that he had to put up a front and let out a drunken burp. Captain gave it to me. You want to pick a fight with the captain? Bojo face-bombed again. Yet, Yunhu only glanced at him. He sat beside that person, his expression unchanged, but his words were routine. I know, you didn't dare to drink in front of me, but you dared to after coming out. Who said I didn't dare to? Lin Feng opened another can of wine, drinking in a heroic manner. In less than 2 cans, his eyes started to blur again. He probably couldn't recognize anyone, otherwise, he wouldn't be looking at Chin Mo, Little Spade. Come, let's have a pajama party. With that, he leaned towards Chin Mo. Chin Mo blocked him with his left hand, his eyes fixed on Yunhu. Aren't you going to take him away? Yunhu pulled Lin Feng back. You want to have a pajama party? Burp, yes. Lin Feng stood up shakily. Yunhu pulled him towards the door. Let's go home, I'll play with you. Lin Feng didn't even know how Yunhu had shoved him into the car. He was still dizzy. He looked sober, glancing up with a determined expression. I'm not going home. I'm still running away from home. Then, where do you want to go? Yunhu glanced at the road ahead. Lin Feng glanced outside, burping again. To the hotel. No, I can't go to the hotel. I didn't bring my identity card. If Yunhu finds out, he will definitely mock me. Is that so? Yunhu watched a certain someone in a daze. This fellow was still as careless as before, forgetting his wallet when he left home. Lin Feng replied, burping again. After a while, he asked, why does this road look so familiar? The roads are all the same, of course it looks familiar. Yunhu continued to turn the steering wheel. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes, looking extremely heroic. You're right, where are we going now? To my house. Yunhu's voice was still as calm as before. Don't you want to have a pajama party? Lin Feng nodded. Yes, a pajama party. With that, he frowned. Why does this road look so familiar? I remember now, this is the road to my house. Did he recognize him? At a red light, Yunhu stopped the car, turning his head, meeting a certain someone's hazy eyes. Lin Feng didn't realize how much his face could hurt the people who liked him. Moreover, when he was drunk, it made people want to go over and kiss him. I got it. Lin Feng shook himself, trying to sit up straight. Your house and mine are in the same direction. Handsome, we are really fated. Indeed. Yunhu restarted the car, thinking that he shouldn't have placed too much hope on a certain someone's intelligence. Lin Feng felt a little high. Burp, we have to have another drink. It's fated. Sure. Yunhu drove the car into the courtyard. Lin Feng looked around. Military Base 1, burp, it seems real. When did such a small area appear beside our house? Why didn't I know about it? Yunhu changed the gear, stopped the car, and helped Lin Feng down. No, that's not right, I'm still running away from home. This is Military Base 1, I want to go that way. Lin Feng pointed in the direction of the main entrance. Yunhu helped him forward 3 steps. This is the right way. Do you think I can't tell the direction when I'm drunk? Lin Feng shook his head, trying to sober himself up. I'm telling you, I can still drink another 30 bottles. Let's go back to the room, I'll drink with you, Yunhu said faintly, carrying Lin Feng up. The two of them even had their auras entangled together, even though there were other cars in the courtyard, the headlights couldn't reach them. It was as if the two of them were in another small world. No one would disturb them. The night sky darkened. Fu family's villa. At this moment, Bojiu felt that it wasn't a good thing that the naive Lin Feng had left. With Lin Feng around, she would at least be safe. But now, she wasn't so sure. The Almighty's unique minty tobacco scent wafted through the air. Is there something you forgot to do? What? Bojiu arched a brow. Help me bathe. Qi Nemo inched closer, so close that Bojiu stilled. She tilted her head to look into his deep eyes. Her thighs were separated by a layer of cloth, the temperature rising. Her breath became his scent, as though the Almighty's scent was infecting her body. Before Bojiu could open her mouth, her words were cut off by a kiss. First, it was a light lick. Once his handsome face was so close, it was easy to lose her ability to think. Qi Nemo used this force to carry her up and sit on the sofa. His tongue pushed open her lips and entered her mouth, their tongues intertwining. He didn't give her any chance to regret. Bojiu couldn't resist his kiss. The numbness at the tip of her tongue and the melting water kneading made it hard for Bojiu to breathe. Until the Almighty released her. Her mind was blank for a few seconds. It was the days after the pleasure. The numbness spread from her tailbone to her entire body as though she had been electrocuted. Her heartbeat was extremely strong. Not to mention the position between her and the Almighty. She was sitting on the Almighty's lap. He could even feel something boiling hot pressing against him. Under such circumstances, she couldn't agree to the bathing. Bojiu stood up, her ears flushed. I'll look for Xiaodong, he'll help you bathe. Of course, Qin Mo wouldn't allow Qin Xiaodong to touch him. He glanced at Bojiu before glancing at the time, his voice hoarse. Help me bathe after the National League. You can bathe yourself. Qin Mo said the last few words slowly and deeply. Bojiu thought, I might not be here after the National League, but she didn't say it out loud. To her, the National League was a dividing line. After they won the National League, the Fu family would be back and everything would be in He Honghua's hands again. When that happened, it would be time for her to leave. She would use her identity to pursue the criminal. She activated the USB. This meant that she would have to return to the darkness. Qin Mo could tell that she wasn't paying attention. He didn't like her expression at this moment. It was as though she didn't care. She could withdraw at any time and end it at any time. Their relationship wasn't the kind that could end at any time. If she couldn't realize this, he would make her realize it. Bojiu thought she was safe. Unexpectedly, the moment she entered the room, she was about to bring a pillow to the guest room. The Almighty pushed her against the wall and gave her another round of powerless kisses. Bojiu couldn't take it. Her legs were numb and soft. When she regained her senses, she was carried onto the bed. Bojiu's bed was a single bed, much narrower than a double bed. This bed was convenient for Qin Mo to a certain extent. The two of them were very close. That handsome face that made her heart race was right in front of her eyes. Qin Mo lowered his lids to look at the person in his arms. Even the scorching breath could stir up one's spirit. Since you don't want to help me, I can help you. With that, Qin Mo carried her again and kicked the bathroom door open. When the shower started, both of their clothes were wet. It was cold water and wasn't warm yet. When it splashed on their bodies, it made them shudder. Qin Mo skillfully removed the cloth strips. As the cloth fell off, the water started to heat up. Everything was different. Bojiu was wearing a black t-shirt. Now that it was wet, it was sticking to her body. Qin Mo's eyes darkened at the sight of her curvaceous figure. Without any hesitation, he carried her up and placed her on the counter. His gaze deepened. Qin Mo watched as the clear water droplets slid down the youngster's clean and devilish cheeks. Her wet silver hair fell down and stuck to the side of her ears. The color of her lips was even more alluring. The outline of her waist was smooth and supple. Under the water vapor, there was a bewitching color. The water droplets continued to roll down, landing on the back of Qin Mo's hand. Such a scene was especially ambiguous. It was like a beautiful and oppressive dream, teasing one's heart to the point where it was no longer calm. Bojiu went numb and wanted to push him away. But Qin Mo pressed her down, his warm breath hitting the back of her ears. He chuckled. Your breathing is messed up too. It seems like you want me to give you more, the water vapor gathered. Enveloped in the smoky water vapor, Bojiu's black t-shirt was crumpled beyond recognition. Qin Mo pushed it to her heart. His thin lips landed, every kiss hot. Bojiu trembled. A young lady's body couldn't withstand such teasing. She didn't have any defense against Qin Mo. The water droplets splashed down. Qin Mo didn't turn off the shower. When he stepped on her pants, he arched his waist and barged in. Bojiu couldn't withstand that kind of speed. Everything was messed up. It was hot and numb. The water droplets splashed on her body. Her only support was him. And this time, the force was unprecedentedly strong. He nibbled on her ear and pressed his chest against her back. She braced her hands against the wall as if to soften the impact of the blow. But when he stopped, there was hope that he could regain his previous strength. Qin Mo paused, moving closer to the youngster's face. His voice was low. Tell me, why do you want to leave? Bojiu frowned slightly. Her snow-white skin was on full display. Especially when the cloth around her chest was undone, she really became a seductive demon. Even the corners of her eyes were tainted with a tenderness that made people want to destroy her. But the stubbornness of biting her lips made her even more irresistible. Chin Mo held her waist, coaxing her. "Tell me, who did you learn your hacking skills from?" "Self-study." Bojo uttered the word, her voice trailing off. Her seductive waist trembled unconsciously. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed. "Do you think I'll believe you?" Bojo didn't want to continue this topic. She turned her face, smiling seductively. "Brother Mo, don't you think it's a waste of time to ask such questions at this time? Or, Brother Mo, are you out of energy?" "Out of energy." Chin Mo pressed her into his arms, his voice so deep that it was raspy. "I'll show you now if I still have the strength." Chapter 952. When Bojo dashed out, her waist and legs were still affected. But after teasing the Almighty, she was still in a good mood. Even when she was eating breakfast, her lips were still in a smile. Chen Xiaodong arranged the things before heading upstairs and knocking on the guest room door. He wondered if Almighty Qin would have a bad temper when he woke up. Madam had passed the task of waking him up to him. He was really scared out of his wits. He knocked 3 times but no one answered. Chen Xiaodong pressed his ear against the door, about to say something. The door behind him opened. Almighty Qin walked out with one hand in his pocket. He seemed to have just showered. He glanced at him, his gaze slow. "What's the matter?" Chen Xiaodong stilled. He glanced at the guest room he had knocked on and then at the room Almighty Qin had come out from. His mouth was wide open enough to fit an egg. Almighty Qin had just come out from young master's room. At this hour, he had come out from young master's room. There was too much information. Chen Xiaodong could only hold it in. He couldn't say anything. Most importantly, he couldn't let Madam know. This time, young master was completely gay. He Honghua didn't know what was going on. She just felt that her Jiu was sitting there, her lips were a little pink, and her eyes seemed to be open. After a night, she seemed to look much better. Her skin was still white, an indescribable change. Bojo bit on a youtiao. Her waist was slightly sore but with He Honghua around, she couldn't rub it. Fortunately, a phone call came in, allowing her to change her posture. Bojo was delighted when she saw the caller. It was Lin Feng, that naive boy. "Hello." The person sitting on the toilet wasn't wearing a shirt, only a pair of SpongeBob SquarePants boxers, exposing his ribs. When he heard the voice coming from the other side of the phone, he grabbed his hair, sounding extremely aggrieved. "Little Spade, why didn't you stop Yunhu yesterday? How can you be such a brother?" Bojo started to help Lin Feng recall. "Last night, you were the one who thought Almighty Yun wasn't bad and insisted on having a drink with him. I never expected you to leave with him so obediently. I was so drunk that I didn't know it was him." Lin Feng was filled with regret. Bojo didn't miss the chance to listen to the live broadcast. "What about now? Where are you? What's going on?" At the mention of this, Lin Feng felt miserable. "Didn't I drink too much last night? You're a man, so you should know that when a man drinks too much, he can't control himself. That's why Almighty Yun finally slept with you," using the scenes mentioned in the novel, Bojo continued, going along with the flow. Lin Feng wanted to jump again. "What do you mean he finally slept with me? I should be the one sleeping with him." Speaking up to this point, Lin Feng paused. "It's not that exaggerated. He just helped me with something." Bojo took a sip of water. "What are you worried about?" "I'm AF** king straight man. How can I take that?" Lin Feng pulled at his hair for a while. Most importantly, I blacked out yesterday. I don't know if I did anything to him after that. He's still lying on the bed and seems to be in pain. If I really did something to him because of alcohol, my conscience wouldn't be able to bear it. Bo Jiu caught on to the main point. You're saying that you drank too much last night and accidentally slept with Almighty Yun. That's right. Lin Feng sighed deeply, concluding, if that really happened, I can't be responsible for him. Bo Jiu wanted to tell him that it wouldn't happen, that he was overestimating his abilities. From front to back, from left to right, he seemed to be the one on the receiving end. You were already so drunk, Almighty Yun should be the one sleeping with you. How could you sleep with Almighty Yun? But Bo Jiu wasn't going to expose him. What do you intend to do now? Bo Jiu asked a practical question. Lin Feng was still sitting on the toilet, his handsome face filled with sorrow. I'll think about it. He hung up. Lin Feng wanted to smoke to calm himself down. He felt that he had let that fellow down. Because he still had some memories from last night. That was strange. Why did he find that person so handsome? He probably knew that after the competition, he would be leaving the country. He wanted to say something from the bottom of his heart. But for some reason, as he spoke, the feeling changed. It was probably because a man couldn't resist the temptation after drinking. Even now, when he closed his eyes, Lin Feng could hear what the person was saying beside his ear. The scorching hot breath hit the back of his ear. The voice was very low and had a little husky sexiness to it. Lin Feng, you're hard. Lin Feng didn't want to recall what happened next. Why did he lose control when he was drunk? He could have taken advantage of anyone, but he had to take advantage of Yun Hu. With that, Lin Feng glanced at himself. It's all your fault. Don't you know that no matter how good it is, you can't be gay? You brat. Just as Lin Feng was lecturing himself. Swoosh. The bathroom door was pulled open. Lin Feng braced himself, not daring to look up. Yun Hu leaned against the door, his face handsome and calm. He glanced over at a certain someone who had been pulling his hair in the bathroom ever since he woke up. His voice was calm. How much longer are you going to nag at your little Lin Feng? Little Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't want to comment on Yun Hu's description. He was sad. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have run away from home yesterday. He had to maintain his dignity. Lin Feng coughed, feeling that he didn't have any dignity in his boxer shorts. He could only pretend to be calm. Leave first. Yun Hu felt that his emotions weren't right. After yesterday's sweetness, he understood that he couldn't force him too much. He knew this better than anyone else. Lin Feng might look like that. In reality, he was more straightforward than anyone else. Ever since he was young, he had been thinking about marrying a cute girl. He said that girls had to be doted on and that his wife couldn't be cold or hungry in the future. Hence, even cooking, which didn't fit his persona, was extremely good. Lin Feng had never known. When he heard those things, he didn't know how his heart worked. He wanted to let him get what he wanted. After all, this guy deserved to be treated gently. But he was jealous from the bottom of his heart. He was jealous of the girl who would get him in the future. He was so jealous that he didn't dare to voice his thoughts. If it hadn't been for Little Spade, this guy might never have been enlightened. With a couple by his side, he realized that he really liked him. It had never been brotherly love. Chapter 953. With that in mind, Yun Hu's entire being became indescribably gloomy. His heart felt as though it had been stabbed. Regardless of how strong he appeared in front of that person, when he sat like this, he still felt a sense of despair. Bang! Lin Feng had probably made up his mind. He rushed out of the washroom. Originally, he wanted to tell him in one go that he really couldn't be gay and that they could be brothers again. But when he saw that person sitting there with a pale side profile, he couldn't say the words that were at the tip of his tongue. After all, Yunhu really looked as though he had done something to him. He looked a little pitiful. He had never seen such an expression on his face before. Come to think of it, it made sense. Even if Yunhu was gay, he should be the one on top. He could just treat him as a straight man. It probably wouldn't be easy for him to accept being defiled by him. When Yunhu heard the commotion, he glanced over. He had already recovered his usual calm demeanor, that gaze emotionless. But Lin Feng felt that there was a lot of meaning behind that gaze. In addition, Yunhu's current position. He seemed to have been rubbing his waist since just now. Even though Lin Feng was a newbie, he was a newbie who had seen porn. Every person who had been F***ed probably looked like Yunhu now, his waist uncomfortable and different from usual. So last night, he really did something to Yunhu. Lin Feng inhaled deeply, looking at himself and then at Yunhu, his face solemn. Don't worry, I will take responsibility. Take responsibility. Yunhu was stunned by the sudden change. He didn't think that he had to take responsibility for helping him to masturbate, or, did this guy misunderstand something again? Lin Feng sat down. His posture was a little chinibu. Luckily, his face was handsome. Although I was so impulsive because I was drunk, what I did is what I did. I will take responsibility for you. However, you have to give me a process. After all, I'm straight. I really don't understand what you gays are thinking, but I still have to take responsibility. Did it? Yunhu grasped the crux of the problem. Lin Feng pointed at his waist. His face was a little red. It's that. Are you okay now? Do you need me to go down and buy some medicine? It should be your first time down there, right? Is it still painful? If it hurts, don't hold it in. Tell me. It seemed like this idiot had forgotten that he had sprained his waist last night when he was struggling to go home. Yunhu didn't know who had given him the wrong impression that he had slept with him. But Yunhu didn't intend to explain clearly. He didn't admit or deny it. Instead, his gaze deepened. To be honest, he still didn't understand the direction of a certain person's thoughts. When Lin Feng saw Yunhu turn his head away, he knew that Yunhu didn't want to talk to him. That's right, which man would still be in a good mood after being F***ed? If it was him. He had to beat him to death. Other than the fact that Huzi had ignored him when they were young. Today was the first time he didn't speak at all. Lin Feng was a little flustered. He pondered for a moment and said, "Wait, I'll go make another call." "Did you go to the toilet?" Yunhu glanced up, his voice slow. "Dressed like this?" Lin Feng lowered his head. It was indeed inappropriate. He looked at the clothes on the ground. They were already wrinkled and couldn't be worn at all. How intense had they been yesterday? The clothes were thrown on the ground. Lin Feng covered his eyes. Yunhu didn't need to look at him to know what he was thinking. It seemed like this guy had even forgotten that he had taken off his clothes, waved them in his hands, and thrown them on the ground casually. "I'm dressed." Lin Feng casually put on a pair of pants and said to Yunhu, "Wait for me." Yunhu reached out and grabbed his wrist. "Are you going to call Little Spade again? Tell me directly if you have anything. Why are you always calling Little Spade? Isn't he experienced? I wanted to ask how to deal with it but you ignored me." Lin Feng grabbed his hair. Yunhu glanced at him. "Go ahead." Lin Feng flew into the washroom like a sparrow freed from its shackles. He called Little Spade and explained the situation before asking, "Do you think I should be more concerned about him? After all, it's his first time being F***ed. He probably can't accept it psychologically." Bojo didn't reply because the Almighty, who was sitting in front of her, took his phone over and showed her his screen. It was a message from Yunhu to the Almighty. There was only one line. Regardless of what Lin Feng says, get little Spade to agree. He was so scheming. Did Lin Feng know that he was naive? Bojo asked lazily, where are you now? In the washroom. Lin Feng glanced at the ceiling. Do you understand how I feel? As though I've suddenly become a father. Bojo thought to herself, I've always been trying my best to be the Almighty's sugar daddy. What does a new father like you understand? Why are you always in the washroom? I'm not afraid of Yunhu hearing me. Lin Feng sighed. You don't understand how complicated my feelings are. You are the one who doesn't understand. Almighty Yun can predict everything you say. Is there a need to listen? This naive girl, if you think you can turn gay for Almighty Yun, go ahead. If you can't, we're all adults and you don't have to be responsible for sleeping with him. In the end, it all depends on your heart. There are some things that can't be forced. It's best not to force yourself. Bojo's words were honest. It was because she treated them as friends. A relationship born from a misunderstanding wouldn't last long. Because she cared, the hurt would only deepen. But if Lin Feng was willing, the misunderstanding would be a beautiful one, but it was obvious that Qin Mo didn't like hearing her words. The feeling that this person was indifferent to everything came back again. It seemed as though even if he wanted her, it didn't mean that he had her. Qin Mo's heart tightened unconsciously, and even his gaze deepened. He had never been anyone's boyfriend. He wouldn't be. But this person seemed to have never treated him as a boyfriend. With that, Qin Mo reached out and lifted the youngster's chin. He leaned over and kissed her lips. Chen Xiaodong, who was standing at the side, thought. He hadn't expected to witness such a scene. It had happened without any warning. This was the Fu family's house. What if Madame saw? Bojo was startled when she felt a slight chill on her lips. Chapter 954. Bojo hadn't expected the Almighty to kiss her all of a sudden. She was still holding the phone in her hand, her clean and fair face paused for a moment. She even forgot what she wanted to say. She could only look at the handsome face in front of her. When the kiss ended, her lips were brushed by his, and it was cold and ticklish. After Yunhu sent the WeChat message, he stuffed his phone into his pocket. When he saw him come out, he pretended to be uneasy and said, "You don't have to take responsibility, we are both guys. It's normal to sleep for a night. It's good enough that you didn't despise me." If Yunhu hadn't said that, Lin Feng wouldn't have felt sorry for him. Especially when he tilted his head, which made him look slightly fragile. Are you sure it's fragile? Qin Mo looked at the person in front of him who was holding her phone in a daze. Because she had just woken up, her silver hair was still fluffy. She looked like a little tiger that wanted to be pampered. He couldn't help but lift his thin lips and lean over to kiss the corner of her lips. Chen Xiaodong. Mommy, I really don't want to see two guys kissing in front of me. I'm a straight guy, I'm gay. In Almighty Qin's eyes, didn't he, a third wheel, exist? Obviously not. Sometimes, kissing was a way to declare his ownership. It wasn't just to let others know, it was also to let Bojo know that she wasn't a big deal. Bojo blinked. The Almighty's gaze seemed to be deep. He seemed to like her, but at the same time, it seemed like he wanted to stuff her into the bin. Hey, little Spade. Hey. Why aren't you saying anything? Is there no signal? On the other end of the line, Lin Feng glanced at his phone, assuming that the washroom was blocking his communication with his brother. Forget it, I've decided. I'm going to lay my cards on the table. Lin Feng put away his phone and pulled open the wooden door of the bathroom. Lin Feng's gaze was heavy. I have to take responsibility. Yunhu watched as a certain someone took the bait, looking valiant and high-spirited. He asked the most practical question. How do you intend to take responsibility? Marry you. Lin Feng added, I'll try my best to marry you. Oh. Yunhu didn't know what to say. This guy was still a straight guy. He wanted to marry her after sleeping with her. You should know how I feel about you. Yunhu followed his train of thought and said, I won't agree to the arranged marriage and marriage of convenience in novels. Lin Feng thought to himself, of course I know what you mean. If you dare to bring up the matter of hitting me, I will cripple you right now. However, he had just slept with her, so he had to be gentle. Speak. Yunhu replied faintly, I want to kiss you the moment I see you, so let's start with kissing. Kiss, kiss. Lin Feng's eyes widened. This wasn't within his scope of consideration at all. Yunhu was a two-faced person. You weren't this excited when you hugged me yesterday. She hugged him and vomited, not daring to let go. Helplessly, when Lin Feng heard that, his mind automatically started to play some small scenes. His face turned red, and he felt very uneasy. All right. Yunhu arched a brow. What's good about it? Let's start with kissing. Lin Feng leaned over like a man, putting on an expression as if he was a paper tiger. Yunhu replied leisurely, Are you going to do it or should I? Of course, I'll do it, I'll be the attacker. Lin Feng was very firm on this point. When Yunhu heard the words I'll be the attacker, his expression didn't change, he just arched a brow, his gaze deep as he looked at the person he could finally have. Even if it was an illusion, Lin Feng leaned over a little, and then a little more. When he was almost there, he felt an inexplicable heat in his ears. He glanced at that person, and after a moment, he said, Close your eyes. Do I need to close my eyes? Yunhu arched a brow, thinking about this fellow's kissing experience. Do you close your eyes when kissing your ex-girlfriend? Lin Feng recalled the last time he scared this fellow, his gaze fluttering. Of course. Don't people close their eyes when kissing on TV? All right. There was a hint of unwillingness in Yunhu's voice. He wasn't willing because if only his first kiss had been his as well. Lin Feng leaned forward again, but this time, his ears felt even hotter. Why was Yunhu still so strong even with his eyes closed? It must be because this fellow was too handsome. Lin Feng looked at the tall nose that was inches away from him. In the past, he had always been envious of Yunhu's looks. He was the kind of man who had good looks and wasn't feminine at all, unlike him, who was naturally tender. When they were close enough, Lin Feng's gaze swept towards Yunhu's lips. For some reason, his heart started racing, and he felt a little uncomfortable. Thinking about it carefully, who would kiss their brother of more than 20 years? Even when they fooled around, it wasn't like this. After all, they were both men. Lin Feng took a deep breath and said, Can I kiss your face? Yunhu opened his eyes, watching Lin Feng's expression. Even though he had concealed his emotions, this fellow had never been an expert in terms of emotions, the slightest bit of unwillingness could be seen. Yunhu's heart sank, and he asked, Is it difficult to kiss? I really can't kiss you. Lin Feng hadn't finished the word go. His thin lips were blocked. Yunhu liked to drink tea, and when he kissed, it was filled with his unique tea fragrance. There was also an indescribable feeling. Lin Feng froze on the spot, his eyes wide open. Yunhu took the opportunity to pry open his lips, the tip of his tongue hooking upwards, not giving him a chance to catch his breath. How could a naive person like Lin Feng be Yunhu's match in this aspect? Just as he was about to speak, Yunhu's kiss wrapped around him. The feeling of the tip of his tongue being sucked made him shudder. There was nothing left in his head, only a blank space. Lin Feng reached out, pushing him away. The back of his hand subconsciously rubbed his thin lips, the burning feeling still lingering. Yunhu, who was pushed away, sat up straight, glanced at him, his fingers brushing across his bitten lips. Lin Feng wanted to explain. After all, Yunhu had tried his best just now. It was hard for him to accept it psychologically. Unexpectedly, Yunhu spoke faster than him. It's nothing. If you can't accept it now, take it slow. One day you will be able to accept it. With that, he stood up, the fringe on his forehead blocking his eyes. I'm going to take a shower. Lin Feng opened his mouth, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He sat on the bed and grabbed his hair. The shower was turned on. Yunhu stood below, the water droplets sliding down his straight back. That sentence wasn't meant for Lin Feng, it was better to say it to himself. He liked someone for too long. It was so long that he was afraid he would marry someone else one day. But with his grand appearance, he would have to miss it, at the Fu family's house. Bo Jiu was still trying to guess what the Almighty was thinking. Qi Nemo glanced at the time on his wrist, saying faintly, "Let's go after eating, we're going to meet the advertiser." Advertiser? Bo Jiu arched a brow. I have to meet him too. Qi Mo's side profile was very attractive. Isn't it good to let you earn some pocket money by filming advertisements? That's not bad, it proves that I rely on my looks to make a living. Bo Jiu smiled, her love for money was well known. Qi Nemo watched as the youngster's eyes fell on the money. He didn't want to admit that he had fallen for her, to the point of being hopeless. If she wanted money, wouldn't it be better for him to be her boyfriend? He had never seen such an idiot before. Qi Nemo lowered his gaze, glancing at the display on his phone. It was Feng Yi, the car had arrived, 10 p.m. in the advertising studio. Due to the large amount of investors, there were many celebrities in the studio. Yi Sihua and his manager, who had tried to embarrass Bo Jiu at the gathering 2 days ago, were among them. These 2 days, Yi Sihua's popularity had soared. A popular youth idol drama had helped him gain a lot of fans. But that wasn't the reason for the rise in popularity. The real reason why his value had skyrocketed was because he had appeared on the casting list of an international director, William. Everyone knew that anyone who could show their face in such a blockbuster would have a different meaning in the industry. But Yi Sihua was difficult to negotiate with. The advertiser had already given him a persona. They felt that it wasn't outstanding enough and insisted on 2 more scenes. This advertisement was different from the others. The Chinese director had wanted to film a microfilm advertisement. After all, he was in the electronics industry. But he was just a pretty face, no one would believe him if he claimed to have acted before. He felt that adding 2 more scenes would ruin the beauty. Both parties couldn't hold on. Yi Sihua looked as though he was the big shot and if they didn't please him, he wouldn't be able to negotiate. The Chinese director had a unique personality, placing the camera over, a smile on her lips as she answered the call. Teacher. Are you coming over? It would be great if you could come over, you can help me control the scene. After she hung up, the big shot, who had been spoiled by his fans, was still wearing his sunglasses, looking high and mighty. The Chinese director thought to herself, the rumored fresh meat had good looks and acting skills. He even respected the staff. That must be bullsh*t, our condition is still the same, our Sihua's face can't be flashed across the screen. The manager had her considerations, after all, the status of the artiste under her was different now, she had to have some demands. The Chinese director couldn't convince them and was about to walk over to say something. Just then, a voice came from the other side. He's so handsome. Why are young Master Qin and Big Spade here? I can't believe it, Oh my God, I'm satisfied. Big Spade. A professionally sports player, the silver-haired handsome youngster. I thought he was cosplaying. How could he be so handsome in real life? The discussion heated up as the two of them walked in. Even the Chinese director looked over curiously. He wouldn't have known if he didn't look, but his eyes lit up the moment he saw it. This was exactly the kind of character that she wanted the most. A laptop advertisement. The theme was mysterious and beautiful. What she wanted to do was to tell a short story with a visual sense. Hence, she had asked the manufacturer to find a couple for her. Even if they weren't a couple, they had to be young and handsome. Handsome didn't have to be rigid, it had to have a unique charm, and it would be best if they weren't bad at computer games. Now, looking at the two of them, the Chinese director only had one thought. It didn't matter if they didn't know how to computer games, as long as they could pose properly, reveal their faces, and add a little expression, it would be perfect. Who are they? The Chinese director had just returned from overseas, pulling a staff over to ask. The staff had an incredulous expression. Young Master Qin and Spade Z, they are the professionally sports players who replaced the previous couple. The advertiser got them from their manager, but they only agreed to show their faces. They just arrived. The Chinese director's heart blossomed when she heard the staff's words. She had to make the best use of the actors. Arrange for their makeup and clothes. Makeup was fine, but Qin Mo wouldn't allow anyone to touch her. Fortunately, they were in a filming studio and the environment wasn't bad. Bo Jiu took the clothes from the staff and smiled faintly. Thank you, I can do it myself. The staff didn't know how to play games and didn't watch esports competitions. But when she saw the youngster's handsome face and thanked her, she couldn't help blushing. She finally understood why so many people were infatuated with this youngster. Even though he was in the esports industry, his popularity was high. He was really handsome. He wasn't just handsome, his gaze was gentle as well. There were many handsome men and beautiful women in the esports industry. But there weren't many people like this youngster who exuded an aura as pure as jade. From afar, Yi Sihua narrowed his eyes, his face darkening. Why is that useless Fu family here? The manager wasn't sure either. I'll go ask. It's fine. Yi Sihua's expression darkened. With young Master Qin by his side, it wouldn't be strange for him to go anywhere. Go ask the director when they are filming. All right. The manager didn't want to provoke young Master Qin since they couldn't wait to fawn over him. Yi Sihua was still looking at the staff. Why would she give the clothes to that useless person? Was he here to film an advertisement? Yi Sihua's eyes dimmed. The staff was still standing outside the changing room. There were two changing rooms. Bo Jiu went to one while Qin Mo went to the other. The staff paced back and forth, hoping to catch a glimpse of the youngster after she changed her clothes. After about 3 minutes, Bo Jiu walked out. Actually, this was what she usually wore when she was at the Fifth Avenue. He was wearing a white shirt, a black trench coat, a long tie, and a pure black mask on his face. This was to reduce his presence. Unexpectedly, the clothes for the advertisement were the same. Bo Jiu arched a brow, reaching out to loosen her tie. The Chinese director and the staff were dazzled by her handsomeness. Chapter 955. The Chinese director's eyes lit up. She couldn't wait to get the cameraman to start the shoot. This was the male lead in her heart. How could someone be so perfect? Even with the mask, it couldn't hide the superstar aura he exuded. When the Chinese director had first seen the youngster, she had felt that he looked too clean and pure. Perhaps, he wouldn't be able to bring out the mysterious effect. Unexpectedly, as compared to the previous set of clothes, the black trench coat and mask were more suitable for him. The moment Bojo came out, she was stared at by the two girls. Usually, she had a strong tolerance, but today, she was being stared at for a long time. She paused for a moment before asking, "May I ask, what kind of advertisement are we shooting?" "Ah." The stage supervisor snapped back to her senses and was about to speak. Chi Nemo pushed the door open and walked out, silencing the entire set once more. Some people, regardless of what they wore, would be able to bring out their unique aura. Noble, indifferent, porcelain white skin. This was everyone's first impression of Chi Nemo. At this moment, Chi Nemo was wearing a white shirt, holding a can of beer in his hand. His collar was half open. He had wet his hair for the styling. Black strands of hair scattered across his forehead, water droplets sliding down the bridge of his nose. He looked casual and sexy. So handsome. Someone sucked in a sharp breath. Bojo turned, looking at the person. She was met with a pair of deep eyes. The moment Chi Nemo saw her, the color of his eyes deepened. They were separated by half the studio, one in the light and the other in the dark. Bojo was still wearing the mask. In that instant, her heart skipped a beat. It was because she suddenly remembered something. The Almighty had seen her at Fifth Avenue. Even though it had just been a brush. But back then, she had been wearing a black trench coat with a hood and a black mask. Other than the color of her hair, she had looked exactly the same as now. Bojo wasn't sure if the Almighty would remember the time they had brushed shoulders when he saw her in this state. For some reason, she felt a little guilty. She tilted her head and prayed in her heart, "Don't remember, don't remember." Just as she was thinking about this, a person appeared in front of her. That person enveloped her on the spot. It could be said that she bumped into that person's arms. When the tip of his nose touched the white shirt, he let out a long sigh. Just like this, it didn't seem like he didn't recognize him at all. "You don't even know how to walk." A melodious voice sounded from above. Bojo glanced up and touched the bridge of her nose. Chi Nemo studied the youngster's face, especially when his gaze swept over her masked face. His voice was faint, a little nonchalant. "In the past, when I went to America to play, I bumped into someone who looked like you." Bojo's left hand, which was in her pocket, paused. When she smiled, her eyes were sincere. "I'm so handsome, how can there be someone like me? I really want to meet him." See. When she heard the codename, Bojo tilted her head. Through the mask, she asked, "What?" "The person I bumped into in America was Z." Chi Mo's side profile remained emotionless. Bojo paused, widening her eyes. With the mask on, she looked extremely innocent. "Brother Mo, you mean that I look like Z?" Chi Mo's thin lips lifted. He paused and leaned forward, whispering into her ear, "It's a pity that you aren't an actor." Bojo's heart sank, but the corners of her eyes lifted. She looked mischievous. "It's indeed a waste of my good looks if I don't act. In such a public event. There would definitely be many people looking over." Bojo could hear the commotion around her, but it probably wouldn't affect the Almighty much. But for the sake of Feng Yi, she had to remind the Almighty, "Brother Mo, this is a filming studio." She meant for him to restrain himself. Otherwise, Manager Feng would have to go out to drink and explain. It would be rather pitiful. With that, Chi Nemo pinched Bojo's chin. He didn't kiss her, but that position wasn't any different from a kiss. "It seems like we have to talk again tonight." Because of Chi Mo's domineering action. The Chinese director was inspired again. His eyes were as bright as the headlights of a car. Bojo had no choice but to push him away. "Brother Mo, there's someone else." At this moment, Manager Feng was almost in tears. Little Spade, it wasn't a waste for me to dote on you. When young Master Qin was showing off his love, you even helped me hold him back. Come. Feng Yi pulled Bojio's arm decisively, moving her to the side. When he did this, he braced himself to do it. It was mainly because of the coldness emanating from Qin Mo's eyes. His presence was too strong. He really didn't know how Little Spade could withstand such a strong aura. At the end of the day, Little Spade was thick-skinned. The Chinese director was in the best mood. I suddenly have a good idea. Hurry, set up the scene at the side. Yi Sihua, who had been neglected, was now as dark as the clouds in the sky. After all, he was a popular movie star. What was wrong with this director? Did he really think that a gamer would be more popular than him? Yi Sihua had to admit that things would be different with young Master Qin's participation. Hence, even if it was a commercial, it would be a commercial for him and young Master Qin. That useless Fu family would only bring down his standards. Besides, even if he could play the piano, he wouldn't be presentable. Filming a commercial wasn't easy. It was about not being stiff, being able to look at the camera and having some acting skills. Did that useless thing. We are in a rush to finish the film. Everyone, hurry up, the Chinese director said as he glanced at Yi Sihua, who was still seated in the corner. Yi Sihua wasn't stupid, he knew it wouldn't be good for either of them if it dragged on. He stood up and spoke to his manager. The manager nodded and walked towards Feng Yi. Coincidentally, the Chinese director was there too. The manager's attitude was different now. He smiled and said, if we knew that young Master Qin would be appearing in the commercial, our Sihua would have agreed long ago. It seems like it's fate. Director Li, when can we start filming? Even though the Chinese director had just returned from overseas, he was still in the same industry. One look at his manager was enough to tell what kind of person he was. She picked up the script she had written for the scene, her tone calm. Change your clothes and read the script. Yi Sihua watched from the side. Didn't this little director know that the industry was small? With such an attitude, didn't he know that the industry was small? The manager knew that Yi Sihua wasn't in a good mood. When she walked back, she whispered something in Yi Sihua's ear, reminding him to restrain himself with young Master Qin around. Of course I know, don't worry. Yi Sihua licked his lips, his eyes dimming. I'll deal with this director in the future. As for the person who gave up gaming and insisted on filming a commercial, I'll let him know the difference between us. The manager was still worried. He came with young Master Qin. I won't do anything on the surface. Yi Sihua laughed sinisterly. Don't forget, this commercial has a storyline and there are 3 main characters. Since he is so desperate to prove himself, I'll let him know that it isn't easy to be a main character. The manager's eyes widened. You mean to suppress the scene? Suppressing the scene was a term used in the industry. In the beginning, when experienced actors with good acting skills wanted to teach some fresh meat a lesson, they would occasionally use this trick. After all, there were some who didn't even fulfill their role as an actor. They didn't memorize their lines and went around taking part in variety shows, dragging down the production. In the end, some of the more scheming celebrities used suppressing the scene to plot against each other. Especially when 2 people with similar reputations were together. In order to enhance their image, they would use suppressing the scene. But the manager hadn't expected Yi Sihua to use such a tactic on someone who had never acted before. Why? You don't like it? Yi Sihua glanced at him, his words going straight to the point. Don't forget, there are 3 people in this commercial. The best way to make everyone think I'm the spokesperson is to stand out. The manager nodded in agreement, giving him a thumbs up. On the other side, Bojio was already seated in the makeup room, her lids lowered as she flipped through the script she had written on the spot. At the same time, she was trying to think of a way to escape the conversation with the Almighty. The makeup artist was having a hard time with her. Her eyelashes were black and long, there wasn't a need for makeup. She could use some eyeliner to enhance the depth of her features. That would be more in line with the character in the script. But as for the rest... The makeup artist caressed her smooth and fair face, praising sincerely. Your skin is so good, you don't need to put on foundation. If too many things were applied to this face, it would ruin its original handsomeness. Now that he had brought out a spy, he really looked like the main character of a Korean drama. The Chinese director was getting impatient, asking Bojo, "Have you found the feeling?" When Bojo received the script, she didn't know what to say. It was about a hacker. She didn't need to find the feeling. The Chinese director noticed the youngster's silence, assuming that he was nervous because he hadn't been in this industry before. Hence, he softened his tone. Don't worry, just act naturally. Even if you can't find the feeling, your face is more than enough. Come, stand back a little. The Chinese director walked to the side, making space for everyone. He raised the loudspeaker, his eyes bright as he shouted, "Everyone, get ready. First scene, action." Swoosh. The lights in the studio were all dimmed. It was the layout of a billiard hall. The light that shone down was a little dim. However, the slender figure standing beside the billiard table wasn't dim at all. That wasn't all. When the light shone down, it seemed as though he was tall and slender. He stood there casually with a laptop in front of him. He seemed to be a little bored. He hooked his index finger, opened the can, and for some reason, the corner of his mouth curled up. The girls were going crazy as they watched from the side. I finally understand why everyone says that young Master Chin is the prettiest in Jiang City. He's so handsome. I'm so envious of young Master Chin's future girlfriend. She can look at his face every day. And his figure, young Master Chin is a walking clothes rack. I can't take it anymore, my nose is going to bleed. The girl said that because just as Chin Mo was about to raise his head to take a sip of the ice-cold beer, his eyes seemed to have seen something. He turned towards the door. The camera panned in that direction as well. A young man in a black trench coat walked in from the door. He was probably in the middle of a run. As he was a little thin, he wore a black mask, which made his eyes look very black and bright. His entire person seemed to have been drawn with a line pen. The black and white were distinct, and in an instant, he caught the entire camera. At this moment, Yi Sihua was there too. He was also one of them, playing with a black tablet in his hands. His eyes were fixed on the youngster who was walking over. He had wanted to portray an indifferent person, but to add to his acting, Yi Sihua stood in front of Bojo, his voice cold and aloof. I heard your skills aren't bad, want to play a game? It was a last-minute change of script, but since the scene wasn't too bad, the Chinese director didn't ask for a pause. The moment she had seen Bojo, she had probably forgotten that he wasn't an actor and had only wanted to continue filming. Bojo was still wearing the black mask, her hands stuffed into the pockets of her trench coat. She didn't even glance at Yi Sihua, replying through the mask, I'm not interested. The Chinese director felt that the youngster's performance was perfect. The youngster's performance was more in line with the character she wanted to portray, bringing the character to life. Yi Sihua would never have expected the trash to perform so well in front of the camera. Initially, he had wanted to use his impromptu acting skills to silence the youngster. It would be best if there were more NGs. But now, because of the youngster's reply, the camera swept past him, focusing on the youngster. Anyone who knew how to act would know that Yi Sihua was the one who was being suppressed, and it was a harsh suppression. But Bojo couldn't be blamed. She hadn't been interested in this person. Besides, he had changed his script at the last minute. Everything Bojo did was a natural reaction. After all, she knew that the person she was facing was the Almighty, who was standing at the side of the billiards hall. In the camera, the youngster had already passed Lee Si-hwa, placing the thin laptop on the table and starting to type. Bojo's typing speed had always been fast. Chapter 956. How could there be someone who could move so quickly? Also, the innate sense of being in the camera. Every single detail shocked everyone in the photography team. It was just an advertisement, but it made them want to continue watching. It wasn't just because of the storyline, but also because of the strange tension between the youngster and young Master Qin. The Chinese director didn't forget his mission in the midst of his shock, shifting the camera to the youngster's notebook. There was a huge close-up, especially the bright silver logo, which matched the youngster's hair color. The shot took 3 seconds. The next second, the scene changed. Someone reached out to support the youngster's side across the billiard table. His slender figure lowered, his nose bridge high, his lips thin and his eyes dark. He looked like a flirt. But he didn't even glance at the back of the beauties around him. Instead, he stared at the youngster, his sexy lips lifting into a faint smile. That person wasn't anyone else, it was Qin Mo. Bojo glanced up, their gazes meeting. In that instant, the cover of the notebook was extremely clear. The tension between the two of them became even more obvious. Even though there was hostility in their eyes, when their faces came close, there was an extra hint of ambiguity that made it hard for people to look away. Were they really not a couple? This was the thought in everyone's mind. Some were impressed by the director for coming up with such a scene. This advertisement would definitely be popular. Just based on this scene, no one would ignore the notebook between the two of them. Lee Si-hwa had an extra second of footage, but his gaze wasn't on him. Instead, after Qin Mo spoke, everyone's gaze was focused on him. "Who are you?" That was Qin Mo's line. It was a short 3 words, but because of his actions and the way he looked at the youngster's thin lips, it was extremely alluring. Bojo stood up, walking past the billiard table and picking up a cue stick. When the youngster was doing this, she lifted her trench coat and removed it with one hand. Then she picked up the cue stick and lowered her body, aiming it at the colored ball on the table. A loud swoosh. The colored ball bypassed the half-opened silver notebook and landed in the middle of the net. Just the sound alone was enough to tell that it was a beautiful shot. At this moment, there was an uproar in the studio. Worried that it would affect the filming, everyone covered their mouths as they turned towards her. He was too handsome. The Chinese director felt a little dizzy from the shock again. He quickly moved the camera to capture the scene. When the youth was playing, his shirt was pulled up, revealing a fair jade-like skin. That curve was astonishingly beautiful. Qin Mo's gaze seemed to have stopped there as well. It was dark and deep to the extreme. The youngster retracted her cue and picked up her coat from the billiard table. She casually draped it over her shoulder and smiled devilishly. "Why should I tell you?" What followed was the young man's carefree back view. Qin Mo stood there, looking at the back view like a devil. He pressed his fingers on the notebook and closed it gently. His thin lips curved slightly and he laughed playfully. Ha! Finally, the screen stopped at the notebook. Apart from the notebook's logo, there was only a line of words, "Unfinished, to be continued, Katja." It signaled the end of the shoot. The Chinese director was the first to stand up and clap. The others couldn't hold it in any longer. Previously, they had been afraid to disturb the two of them, but now, everyone stood up and let out a heartfelt exclamation. After all, even a professional actor wouldn't be able to complete the shoot in one take. More importantly, filming this commercial didn't just require the other party to type fast, the scene just now was also a test of their skills. The photography team had originally wanted to use these things for post-production. Who would have expected that Spadesy didn't just do it? He was so handsome that he could turn the commercial into a movie. This wasn't something that could be done easily. The atmosphere in the studio was unprecedentedly intense. When Bojio walked back, the crew were all looking at her like a fangirl. As for Lee Si-hwa's whereabouts, no one cared anymore. His face was completely sunken. He wanted to flare up but he didn't dare. He could only suppress his anger. He didn't want to watch the commercial anymore. He didn't even need to watch it to know that the scene just now had been a deliberate attempt by that useless person to humiliate him. Lee Si-hwa's popularity had been suppressed. Of course, he wasn't in a good mood. He threw his jacket aside and left with his manager. When he left, his mood wasn't quite right. Of course, the staff in the studio could see it. But so what? Anyone who saw the scene just now would know that Lee Si-hwa was up to no good. A professional actor was bullying someone who had never acted before. In the end, he had been suppressed. It was an awkward slap to his face. Lee Si-hwa was still hoping that someone in the studio would ask him to stay. After he walked out, he asked his manager, "Did anyone follow me?" His manager shook his head in embarrassment. Lee Si-hwa raised his leg and kicked the bin beside him. "What is that?" His manager hurriedly consoled him. "It's just a commercial and the director is a newcomer. Even if young Master Chin is around, it won't have much commercial value. You are one of the candidates that Director William admires, this is nothing." After hearing his consolation, Lee Si-hwa's anger subsided a little. "Go and find out where the director is from. He's so disrespectful, he might as well stop filming." "I know what you mean, I'll ask him now." As the agent spoke, she turned on her cell phone and dialed a familiar number. "Reporter Lee. Listen to what you're saying, I don't have anything to reveal to you. However, there's someone I want to ask about, for this shoot." After hearing the manager's words, the person on the other end of the line replied faintly. The manager's expression changed completely. Lee Si-hwa couldn't hear the conversation and could only look at his face. He frowned impatiently. What did he say? Where did the director come from? The agent's hand that was holding the phone slowly lowered as he muttered, "Director William." Lee Si-hwa replied, "I'm asking you where the director came from, why are you mentioning Director William?" The manager's face was pale, he glanced up at Lee Si-hwa. "She followed Director William back to China, she is his only disciple." Instantly, Lee Si-hwa's expression changed, even his lips stiffened. He wanted to go back but there was no way for him to do so. After all, he had left in a fit of anger, it would only embarrass him if he went back. But how did the director become Director William's disciple? Lee Si-hwa was about to go crazy, anger and embarrassment surging through him. The manager was afraid he would do something else, hence, he pulled him into the nanny van. The manager knew that this wasn't just a commercial they had lost, they were afraid of losing even more. The atmosphere in the studio remained the same. No one noticed that in an inconspicuous corner, a foreigner had been watching for a long time. A foreigner had been sitting there watching for a long time. Beside him was an assistant. Ever since the cameras had started, he had been sitting there, his gaze following Bojio's every movement. At this moment, he only had one thought in his mind. Even if this person had a bad reputation, the young hacker in his movie had to be played by him. Did you see the expression on the youngster's face when he was typing and playing the bowl? He is the person we are looking for. Old William couldn't be blamed for his agitation, he had seen many profiles but none of them were as stunning as the youngster every time they met. He fits the role perfectly, be it in terms of looks or personality, he is perfect. He has to be the one, he has to be the one. When old William reached the end of his sentence, he could not help but stand up. Bojio had already changed her clothes and was walking out of the studio. Qin Mo didn't leave because he had something to discuss. Bo Jiu wanted to buy some medicine. As long as she took the medicine within 24 hours, she would be fine. When she left, Bo Jiu took the black mask from the filming crew. She wore it and was about to cross the traffic light. Wait a minute. The person who spoke wasn't very fluent in Chinese, because the two words that came out of his mouth carried a unique accent of a foreigner. Bo Jiu turned towards the direction of the voice. The person who stopped her was a middle-aged foreigner. He was dressed in a traditional Chinese tunic suit, which made him look elegant. For a foreigner, to be elegant, this person's experience would not be very low. I saw your advertisement just now. Are you interested in acting in the movie? Old William asked directly. He didn't care what stupid conditions the youngster had to come up with in order to become famous. As long as he could maintain the state he had been in during the advertisement, he would agree. After all, perfection in the movie was the most important. However, he hadn't expected the youngster to reply. The youth only gave him 2 words, no. His tone was calm and emotionless. The youngster seemed to be in a hurry as he walked towards the opposite direction. Old William stilled for a moment before blurting out, I don't think you know who I am. You should have heard of Hollywood. The youngster paused, arching a brow. I don't care who you are, I'm not interested in acting in the movie. Old William hadn't expected such an answer. Hadn't he always wanted to be famous? Acting in a movie will bring you more attention than playing esports. Old William felt that it wasn't logical. That's not what I meant. I meant that you are a natural actor. Are you sure you don't want to try? I don't want to. Bo Jiu wanted to buy some medicine. Once the Almighty was done, she might not have the chance to buy it. Old William stilled once more. This was the first time he wanted someone to act in his movie, but she wasn't interested at all. But you acted well just now. Why don't you want to act? Bo Jiu watched as the foreigner followed her. She didn't care anymore and crossed the traffic light. No reason. The assistant next to him was a little surprised to see this. Over the years, no one had ever rejected the olive branch that director William had extended to them. He was a director who created stars. As long as the main character acted in his movie, even if they weren't popular before, they would be known quickly and become a superstar. Everyone had to admit that he was a world-class director. The movies he produced were equally shocking. Many Chinese celebrities wished they could be the lucky ones when they heard that director William was going to cast them. But this youngster, the assistant walked over and whispered something to her. Bo Jiu arched a brow. The assistant smiled. You have to introduce yourself before you start the discussion. Director William really thinks that you fit the image of an actor in his mind. Do you want to reconsider? No, Bo Jiu replied without hesitation. She had the cheekiness of a youngster. I have something to do. Since you are an international celebrity, you shouldn't keep following me. You might get photographed. The assistant had thought that everything would be resolved if she mentioned director William's name. But from the looks of it, the youngster didn't seem to have any intention of acting. The assistant turned to look at his boss. The information we received wasn't accurate. If the youngster really wants to be famous, he wouldn't have rejected such a good opportunity. Director William was aware of this, but he could see the youngster's attitude. He wasn't moved at all. He started to panic. Think about it, who would be able to invite this youngster? Isn't he filming a commercial today? The assistant took a moment before replying, we have to contact movie queen, and director William replied, hurry up, it would be best if we can have a meal together. After all, no one had expected to be rejected. If the media were to find out, it would definitely be a hot topic. William didn't care as long as he could invite the youngster into his movie. In the studio, Qin Mo was done with his discussion. He glanced over and asked the assistant, "Where's young Master Joe?" The agent took a long time before realizing that young Master Joe was referring to Big Spade. At such a close distance, he blushed slightly. "Ah. Big Spade asked me about the nearby pharmacy. He must have gone out to buy some medicine." "Buy medicine?" Chin Mo furrowed his brows. The assistant replied, "Yes, he must have gone out to buy flu medicine. It's easy to catch a cold in this weather." "Where's the pharmacy?" Chin Mo had always been cold and polite to strangers. But even so, the girl was still a little incoherent because she had such a long conversation with Almighty Chin. She said, "It's right across the studio, just past the traffic light. It's very easy to recognize." Chapter 957. Bojo wasn't familiar with birth control pills, but she knew it was better to keep a low profile when buying such pills. There weren't many people in the pharmacy, just a few scattered around. Fortunately, they were all elderly aunties. If it was an ordinary young lady and someone recognized her, the situation would definitely be bad. She didn't mind, but manager phone would probably go crazy. It was better not to have news of esports players buying birth control pills. Bojo wore a mask. She looked around but couldn't find what she was looking for. The medicine probably couldn't be placed on the counter, hence, she couldn't find it on the medicine rack. It seemed like she would have to ask the pharmacist. Bojo sighed inwardly as she walked towards the counter. "Hi, get me a box of birth control pills." The doctor standing at the counter glanced up at Bojo. "Which brand do you want?" There was a brand. For the first time, Bojo felt she wasn't cultured enough. She chose a conservative answer. "I'll take whichever brand has the best effect." However, it was this answer that made the shopping guide shake his head and murmur, "Young people nowadays are really..." Bojo wasn't young in her heart, but she hadn't come into contact with such things in her previous life. If it wasn't for the lack of time, she would have wanted to bring the Almighty's child back to the Fifth Avenue. But now... Bojo clenched her fists. This was the only way. A total of 25. Cash or Alipay? The pharmacist glanced over, scanning the barcode. Bojo felt that it wasn't a good time to use her phone. She reached into her pockets but didn't bring any cash. In the end, she inhaled deeply and used her phone. "Is WeChat okay?" "Yes." The pharmacist's expression didn't change. Bojo whipped out her phone. The moment she unlocked the screen, she received a message. It was from the Almighty with only 2 words. "Where are you?" Bojo glanced at the image of the cartoon. She hesitated for a moment but didn't reply. Instead, she opened the payment function. The pharmacist scanned the barcode and passed the medicine to her. Bojo lowered her gaze, her silver hair covering her face as she took the medicine. Suddenly, a deep and familiar voice rang out from above her head. "Shouldn't you explain what you're doing?" Bojo's back stiffened. She only had one hope in her heart, that the Almighty was like her, lacking knowledge in certain areas. The hand that was holding the medicine paused for a moment. Then Bojo quickly stuffed the medicine into her pocket. Even her gaming speed wasn't as fast as it was now. After she was done, Bojo glanced over, meeting Chin Mo's icy gaze behind her. She had never seen an Almighty like this. His deep eyes were extremely deep. Before she could say anything, Chin Mo had already reached out and pulled out the wrist that the youngster had stuffed into his pocket. His voice was as indifferent as the storm before the storm. "What is this?" Bojo opened her mouth, her throat moving. "Medicine." "What medicine?" Chin Mo's handsome face didn't show any emotion, but the cold aura he exuded could freeze the surroundings. Bojo didn't reply because she didn't know how to explain. Chin Mo glanced at the two words "Yuding." He wanted to crush the person in front of him and swallow her into his stomach. That way, she would know who exactly she belonged to. That way, she wouldn't have come to buy this medicine. If that was the case, she wouldn't be thinking of leaving even now. Chin Mo lowered his body, taking the medicine from Bojio's hands. Bojio watched as the medicine slowly deformed in his hands. It seemed as though he wanted to destroy it. But the Almighty's emotions didn't change. Because of this, Bojio knew that he was really angry. Chin Mo lowered his lids, clutching the box of medicine in his palms. With a voice that he had never used before, he said, "I asked you to wait at the same spot but you never waited. Just like at night, when I sleep, I would think about what that arrogant little Joe is doing. I want to wake up earlier so that I can see her earlier. It's the first time I want to kiss someone but I can't do it. You probably don't understand this feeling at all. That's why you bought this medicine here." Bojio wanted to say something. But the Almighty seemed to be listening to her explanation. "Do you think I'm illiterate or that I don't recognize this brand? Since you don't want to be together, let's break up." After saying that, the Almighty only gave her a distant view of his back. Bojio had seen that back view way too many times before she had gotten close to the Almighty. But there had never been a time like this, when she couldn't breathe. She wasn't sure when it started to rain. When Bojio walked out, the Almighty was nowhere to be seen. He must have been picked up by the Chin family's car. Bojio clenched her fists, her gaze sinking. She stood in the rain, her hair slightly damp. Her back was still straight, but it had never been as listless as it was today. She was like a little tiger that had been caught in the rain and didn't know how to warm herself up. Perhaps because the person who could warm her up had left, she didn't care about the water splashing on her. That was how Feng Yi saw her when he rushed over. From what he could remember, the devilish youngster had never been like this. Had they quarreled? That was Feng Yi's first reaction. Where was Boss Chin? He glanced left and right, unable to find him. Feng Yi was almost certain that they had quarreled. He reached out to press down on his brows. His head started to hurt. If even little Spade was like this, he could almost imagine young Master Chin being in a bad mood and how low his aura would be for the entire day. He guessed that the managers of the various departments would be having a tough time. But how did they end up in such a state? With young Master Chin's personality, even if he was angry, he would have taken little Spade away to teach her a lesson. Why did he leave her here? Feng Yi frowned, bringing Bojio into the car. It wasn't good to be drenched like this. He tried to communicate with the youngster. Weren't you fine just now? How did you end up like this after buying some medicine? Bojio glanced out of the window, the rainwater trailing down the ends of her silver hair. She didn't care, her handsome face tilted to the side, hiding her expression. Her mind was still ringing with that sentence. Since you don't want to be together, let's break up. Breaking up was only a matter of time. She had no choice but to reject it. She had overestimated her tolerance. Just a few words could affect her to such an extent. If she waited until the Almighty found out about her identity, he would frown and look at her in disgust. She probably wouldn't be able to take it. Bojio reached out to press her fringe down. When her phone rang, her voice was slightly hoarse. Hello. It was a call from the school. Bojio's boarding application had been approved and the school had asked her to bring her luggage over. Even if she still had to participate in the competition, she still had to follow the school's basic procedures. In reality, Bojio wasn't in the mood to think about what the other party had said. But she could do something to distract her. If she stayed in the school, it wouldn't be too abrupt when she left. Bojio had been stalling for time. She understood all too well that no one would feel good when someone suddenly disappeared. But if everyone knew that the person beside them was an international criminal, He Honghua would probably be frightened. She didn't want to see that. This time, she had used her identity to return, which meant that some people were already aware of her return. Among them, there would be people who wanted her dead. If they found out about her identity, He Honghua would be in danger. Hence, she had to leave. Just like back then, even if she didn't want to leave her puppy without saying goodbye, she still had to leave. Bojo still remembered that night. After she had climbed onto the balcony, she had used a lot of strength to enter his room. In order to prevent her from attacking him at night, he had always placed some flowers and plants on the balcony. At that time, she hadn't cared about those things. After sneaking into the room, she had looked at him sleeping on the bed and leaned over to kiss his face. She thought that she might as well carry him away. She was strong anyway. But Bojo knew that her puppy wouldn't leave with her. He had his own things to do and his own family. It would be boring to watch her typing every day. And he would meet with danger. Just as her father had said, it wasn't suitable for the young lord of the hacker world to have friends around her. It was still raining outside. Droplets of rain fell on the car window. The Land Rover was very good at preventing rain, especially for military use. It was almost impossible to hear the sound of rain outside. But even so, the driver sitting in the driver's seat didn't dare to say anything at this time. Ever since his young master had entered the car, he had been sitting at the back without saying a word. Rainy days had always been his young master's taboo. Usually, his young master wouldn't go out at this time. This time, it was probably because young Master Joe was following him. Even though the weather wasn't good, his young master didn't seem to be uncomfortable. But now, where was young Master Joe? The driver didn't dare to ask this question because his young master's expression was unprecedentedly cold. Chin Mo didn't feel anything. From the start till the end, his left hand hadn't loosened. There was a box of medicine in his left hand. The box of medicine had been squeezed to a certain extent. Chin Mo's fingers were still the same as before, not softening in the slightest. If it wasn't for this box of medicine. Perhaps he could have told himself. He was different in that fellow's heart. Even though that fellow had many secrets. In front of him, she would treat him sincerely and wouldn't reject being with him. But now that he thought about it, he was the one who said they wanted to be together. It could be said that he had forced her. In her heart, perhaps he wasn't that different. But he was wrong to think that she treated him the same way he treated her. That feeling was as though he had taken a step forward confidently but didn't notice the steps in front of him. He missed his step and fell down with his head bleeding. The pain was unbearable. Chin Mo loosened his left hand and glanced at the car window. After the car reached the military courtyard, he remained in the same position. Movie Queen had just finished shopping with Yi Honghua. She had wanted to sit with Jiu for a chat, but when she opened the car door, only her son was left. What was this? Movie Queen arched a brow and looked at her son's face. Chin Mo alighted from the car, not caring if there were any raindrops on him. He said faintly, "I'm tired, I'll head upstairs first." The intelligent Movie Queen quickly realized that there was a problem. She wanted to head upstairs to ask him but felt that as a parent, she shouldn't interfere with her child's relationship. After entering the room, Chin Mo acted as though nothing had happened. He unbuttoned his shirt and threw his clothes to the side before entering the bathroom. He allowed the water to splash on his head, as though he was trying to clear his head. Indeed, he was much more clear-headed. At the very least, he knew that person's true thoughts. In hindsight, what was so good about that person? She had never been willing to listen to him, much less take him seriously. When had he, Chin Mo, been so lowly? Chin Mo chuckled. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. The coldness in his body didn't seem to be dissipating. Instead, it became thicker after he came out of the bathroom. He sat there, looking at his open laptop. His neck tilted back. Enough. It was indeed enough. But even though he said that, after Chin Mo came down from the stairs, movie queen and noticed something different about her son. For example, he kept looking at his phone. He seemed to be waiting for someone's message. But when he saw the screen, his eyes dimmed again. When he finally received a message, it was from his secretary. "I'm going to the office." Chin Mo stood up. This was the first time he didn't want to have nothing to do. Time trickled by. Bojo was the last student to board the plane at number 1 middle school. The dormitory manager's expression wasn't any better. But she didn't make things difficult for him. The news of Bojo moving into the male dormitory spread through the entire number 1 middle school in an instant. Of course, it attracted many onlookers. Everyone in the dormitory would stop and glance at Bojo. After all, the school hunk staying in the dormitory wasn't something they could be happy about. Moreover, he was an esports star. How many girls would be attracted to him? They didn't have any hope in the future. But there were some who were optimistic. With Bojo here, things would be easier. For example, a photo of the school hunk for 5 yuan. No one knew that Bojo had chosen to move in today because she didn't want to be alone. Chapter 958. The environment in the male dormitory could be described with 3 words: dirty, messy, and bad. Bojo carried her suitcase in. The person who was cooking instant noodles stilled. He hurriedly pulled out the plug and glanced to the side. It couldn't be, the school hunk was staying in our dormitory. There were 6 people in the dormitory, including Bojo. One of the other 5 was a thorny student from number 1 middle school. The thorny student laughed coldly. He still didn't like Bojo. He glanced to his left and right, intending to walk over in an imposing manner. But Bojo threw her suitcase up, stuffing one hand into her pocket. She was wearing her school uniform, her jacket half open. She stood sideways, looking as fierce as ever since she entered the school. Even her eyes were cold. "I'm not in a good mood today. Don't provoke me." The thorny student was even more displeased. Didn't she know there were rules in the dormitory? How dare she be so arrogant in his territory? What did she mean? "I say, do you still want to live?" Before the thorny student could finish his sentence, he reached out to grab the youngster's wrist. But the youngster twisted it cleanly. There was a loud bang. The thorny student was slightly dizzy from the fall. He glanced at the chandelier in the dormitory and shook his head. F***ck, why hadn't anyone told him that the top student was so good at fighting? Bojo lowered her lids. "First, I'm not in a good mood. Second, the one who provoked first is AB***tch. My patience is limited." The thorny student was really hurt. The one who cooked the noodles had always admired Bojo. Now that she was in such a state, he sighed. He hadn't expected the expert in the game to be so good in real life. The thorny student was convinced. He changed his attitude, and after he got up, he cleared a spot for Bojo, pouring her tea and water. Bojo sat on the only wooden chair in the dormitory. Her head hurt. She had never thought of being so domineering. But it seemed like she couldn't change her image anymore. "Boss, don't worry, no one would dare to provoke us in this building." The thorny student fanned her while gossiping. "But boss, why did you suddenly decide to stay in school? Shouldn't good students like you study at home?" Bojo glanced at him. "Based on what you're saying, those who stay on campus aren't good students. I want to experience life." Experience life. That thorn had let out a long sigh. He didn't really understand the world of a top student. When she spoke, she didn't forget to take in the surroundings. I have a condition. Conditional exchange. The other 5 looked at each other. Although I don't do homework, I can still solve some questions. I can help you solve your homework. Similarly, don't let these things appear in the dormitory. Bojo pointed at the dirty socks that were strewn all over the place. There are also these. Besides, we are all hunks and should know the most basic etiquette. It's fine to take off your shirt since the weather is hot, but walking around in just your underwear is an eyesore. If you have a good figure, it might be worth looking at. If you don't, are you showing your bottom line? The boy, who was only wearing a pair of underwear, inexplicably felt like he had been shot. However, since everyone was handsome, everyone in the dormitory agreed. Most importantly, there might be girls coming to visit in the future. Bojo stood at the window, glancing down at the girls who were pacing back and forth. She didn't doubt their offensive abilities. Some of them will take pictures. You guys probably don't want to be caught in the most embarrassing scene. It isn't good to find a girlfriend like this. The moment Bojo finished her sentence, the boy in his underwear leaped into his bed. The boys who didn't care about their appearance changed their clothes and looked at themselves in the mirror. As the roommates of the school hunk, their looks had to be up to par. In the past, no girls had come to visit them. In the future, they would definitely be asked out by girls. From now on, they would have to take care of themselves. At first, the atmosphere was still all right. Suddenly, someone said, "Young Master Joe is here. Will young Master Chin come to visit in the future? Will my favorite Almighty Lin Feng come too?" Bojo didn't listen to what the person said. The 2 words, young Master Chin, seemed to have pierced a certain nerve. It wasn't painful, but the moment she thought about it, she became much quieter. Think about it, the entire Supreme Alliance team will come to our dorm. Young Master Chin's arrival will definitely attract a huge crowd. The person was completely immersed in his own imagination. Bojo glanced up, her voice calm. He won't come. Ah. The people in the dorm were confused. Why did young Master Joe look like he had fallen out of love? No, they couldn't make wild guesses. In the past, they had thought that young Master Joe was definitely gay like the rumors said. But now, which gay was that strong? The rumors couldn't be trusted. But why did young Master Joe come to stay in the dorm? It was a mystery. Do you have a cigarette? Suddenly, the young man spoke again, interrupting his roommate's thoughts. Give me one. He even smoked. This didn't match their image of the top student in school. Second brother, watch the corridor. Howl when the hostel manager comes. The moment the thornhead spoke, even the boy in underwear cooperated. Their efficiency was high. It was obvious that they had done such things often. Smoking had always been a group activity. It was normal for everyone to have a cigarette in the high school dorm. But it was hard for them to accept the fact that the school hunk smoked. Bojo didn't look at their shocked gazes. She tilted her head and lit the cigarette. She stood by the window, not wanting to move. Hey, don't you think the school hunk is a little listless? He looks completely different from when he beat me up. He's probably thinking about the competition. Didn't you see his cooperation with young Master Chin? It was amazing. Bojo turned at the mention of young Master Chin. Didn't I mention that I'm not in a good mood? You gave the entire dorm a show of strength the moment you entered. It was obvious you weren't in a good mood. But why? Do you want to know the reason? Bojo flicked the cigarette ash, her gaze deepening. The 5 roommates looked at the youngster, nodding in unison. Bojo glanced up, her voice cold. I was dumped by young Master Chin. Everyone. Didn't he say he wasn't gay? It was finally quiet. No one mentioned young Master Chin's name again. Bojo extinguished the cigarette and glanced at her phone screen. She hesitated for a long time but didn't send the message. Her roommates didn't dare to talk about her situation since young Master Joe's martial arts skills were too strong. But young Master Joe was probably the only one who could be so handsome after falling out of love. Bojo's mood didn't change even after 2 consecutive cigarettes. She leaned against the wall. Even if she wasn't handsome, she was still listless. The atmosphere in the room was heavy. Her roommates felt that since their new boss was here, they had to celebrate. Do you want to go out for a meal? The big plate chicken at the school entrance is a must-have. Bojo glanced at them. Indeed, she wanted to go out for a walk. Staying here like this made her feel stifled. Let's go. Bojo extinguished the cigarette and walked out. There was a new scenery in number 1 middle school today. The other 5 walked in front. The youngster stuffed her hands into her pockets and followed behind. She wore a black mask and lowered her head to look at her phone. The girls passing by felt their hearts go out of control. Ever since Bojo joined the competition, she hadn't been to school much. Now that she was living in the dormitory, it became a benefit for the girls. The legendary big plate chicken was just opposite the school. It was just a road away. Since it wasn't summer break yet, the weather wasn't particularly hot. Setting up a stall outside the shop and enjoying the natural breeze while eating was a form of enjoyment for the male high school students. Beer was a must. Since she didn't have any lessons today, she was just living in the school. Thorny took a bottle of beer. Just as he was about to pour half a glass for Bojo, the youngster took a bottle over. She bit down on it, opened the cap and gulped it down. The 5 roommates were stunned once more. They watched as the youngster drank without a change in expression. Their school hunk was indeed a ruthless character. They probably noticed that Bojo was looking at her phone. Someone couldn't help but ask, "Young Master Joe, what are you looking at? Why are you so engrossed?" "Nothing." Bojo closed the WeChat page and took another sip of beer. That person didn't think there was anything interesting on the phone. He couldn't understand why young Master Joe was looking at an empty WeChat screen. This meal. Bojo didn't eat much. She just sat there and drank silently. Because it was by the side of the road, anyone who drove would be able to see it as long as they opened the windows. When she opened the 4th bottle of beer, Bojo paused. Bojo paused for a moment. It wasn't because of anything else, but because of the familiar military Land Rover that was driving over. The car plate was unique and there was only one in the entire Jiang city. Bojo recognized the car and so did her roommates. One of them blurted out, "Isn't that young Master Chin's car?" Only then did he realize something and shut his mouth. It was indeed a car Chin Mo often took. The windows weren't closed. They could clearly see that handsome and aloof face. The driver noticed them and paused for a moment. "Young Master, it's young Master Joe." Chin Mo glanced over at Bojo and said calmly, "Let's go." The driver was puzzled. Usually, young Master would ask young Master Joe to get in the car. But today, the roommates who were eating chicken were still thinking about young Master Chin's gaze. He must have looked over, but the next second, the Land Rover drove away. He turned back to look at the youngster's expression. Bojo didn't say anything. She retracted her gaze and ordered another bottle of beer. The roommates were dumbfounded. If they continued drinking, the lovelorn person would be fine, but all of them would collapse. Honestly, the school hunk was a little scary when he was lovelorn. On the other side, the Land Rover was still driving forward. It wasn't going fast. Firstly, the driver was still in shock. Secondly, his young master's gaze was on the rearview mirror. He didn't urge him to drive faster. Instead, he seemed to be waiting for someone. Chin Mo was indeed waiting for someone. He glanced at the rearview mirror, hoping to see the youngster chasing after him. But he didn't. He had glanced at his phone countless times today. He had told himself that as long as that person sent him a message, regardless of what was important to her, he would try not to be too domineering. Once again, reality hit him. That person didn't care about him at all. Feelings were similar to multiplication. As long as one side was 0, the result would be 0. Chin Mo tilted his head, his gaze lowered. The driver wasn't sure what his young master was thinking. He kept staring at the rearview mirror until they left the road. Then, his gaze changed. However, it became even more lifeless. It was as though he had returned to the time when he had known young Master Joe. He wasn't interested in anything. His emotions were indifferent. His gaze was indifferent too. This kind of young master was really worrying. The scenery outside the car window retreated. Time trickled by. Bo Jo didn't continue drinking. She took out her wallet to settle the bill. She glanced at her roommate who was still vomiting in the corner. She stood there and lit another cigarette. She had never smoked so much before. Even when she was on her period, she would only smoke half a cigarette to relieve the pain. But it didn't seem right not to smoke. Perhaps she had never expected that person to treat her like an ordinary person, brushing past her with such an indifferent expression. Her heart tightened. This should be the lightest punishment. When the Almighty found out about her true identity, would he be 100 times colder? No one could predict it. She should do something else to stop herself from thinking about it. That way, it wouldn't be so boring. It would be more natural for them to meet again in the National League. Bo Jo knew that she wasn't being fair. But the Almighty might not know that he liked her in her high school facade. In reality, the real her wasn't that innocent. Underneath this facade, she was an international criminal. He had said that he would capture Z personally and send her to jail. Bo Jo didn't regret taking this path. But sometimes, she would think that it would be great if that person could accompany her on this path. But Bo Jo knew that they were destined to walk different paths. Their methods were different. The Almighty followed the law. And she used her own methods. If it was possible, she hoped that in his heart, she would be the person he wanted to separate from and not a criminal. Chin Group Club. Numerous laptops were switched on at the same time. A meeting was being held in the meeting room. Anyone with eyes could see that Boss Chin's pressure was lower than any other day. It was probably too low. He wasn't even paying attention during the meeting. But to them, it wasn't that bad. Other than the slight fear, everything else was fine. The moment the words, "meeting" ended, were heard. The managers fled the scene hurriedly. Feng Yi had wanted to talk to him about Little Spade, but from the looks of it, anyone who mentioned that name wouldn't have a good ending. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.